evening, folks, and welcome to tonight's Planning Commission meeting. It's 3 December 2019. 19, yeah, whatever it is. Yeah, 2019. 2020 is in a couple of days. At this time, please turn off your phones or at least put them in happy mode. And please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do the invocation, right? Okay. Bow our heads, if you will, and thank God that allows us to have a free forum here in California City, and I hope that He will direct us all in the best way to benefit the city in our decisions that we make. Amen.
Thank you. Please have a seat, folks. Madam Secretary, please roll call us in.
Commissioner Trumbull.
Here.
Commissioner Macedonio.
Here.
Commissioner Hogan.
Here.
Chair Cragen.
Here. All right, I would like a motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
I'll make that motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
I'll second
All in favor?
it. Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Adopted. Madam Secretary, are there any reports or late communications for tonight's meeting? Oh, that's good.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Keith.
I thought we had a power outage there for a second.
Yeah, that's right.
I see.
Keith. Stop playing.
One more. No,
No,
that's fine.
They're trying to blow that out.
no.
That's what we do.
I gotta put up with.
I guess. Well, you paid for
Madam
it.
Secretary, did you respond?
Just one.
I did not. Chair Creighton, we did have a couple of late communications. One was from Mr. Tillett, and his late communication was emailed through planning staff. And also I have a copy here if you'd like to review it. Also, the October 21st meeting minutes was left out of the package, but it was noted in the agenda.
Is that it?
Yes, that's all.
Thank you very much. All right, at this time, we will open it up for public business from the floor. Members of the public are welcome to address the Planning Commission only on those items that are not on tonight's agenda. Each member of the public will be given 3 minutes to speak, and if anybody has anything they wish to bring up, please step forward. Seeing nothing, that's closed. All right, we need to approve the consent calendar. Consent calendar consists of minutes from September 3rd, 2019, October 1st, 2019, October 15th, 2019, and October 21, 2019 of the Planning Commission minutes. Any discussion on any of those items? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adopt, to approve the consent calendar?
We'll make the motion, we approve the consent calendar.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay. Tonight we have 2 public hearings and 4 discussion items. The first public hearing is a tentative parcel map, 12300. Applicant is Leland Krell. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to staff.
Thank you. Chairman Creighton, members of the commission, this is the time and place for a public hearing. Mr. Crow has submitted a tentative parcel map. He is requesting your favorable approval. Tentative parcel map 12300. It includes 4 parcels. This is the actual property looking south to Minden Bureau, which runs east-west. This is the site. It's an air photo of the site. And what's being proposed is it's approximately 10 acres in size, and each parcel, there are 4 parcels, they're about 2.5 acres each. There is a 50-foot public right-of-way dedication at the bottom, which will be dedicated to the city of California City for right-of-way. The remainder would be in those equal portions. This property was rezoned to M1 last fall, or last winter, and the staff has included a resolution for the Planning Commission which approves this tentative parcel map subject to a number of conditions. Brian Glidden, the engineer for the project, is here this evening. He might answer any additional questions that the commissioners might have. At this time, the staff would be pleased to accept any, answer any questions you may have.
Hang on a second, I need to, one thing I forgot to do is declare the public hearing now open. We just heard the staff report. Right now, commissioners, do you have any questions for staff or the proponent? Commissioner Trumbull?
No.
If this is on conditions of some different things you want to square away before you do this? Some other concessions? Is that what you were saying?
I'm Brian Glidden with Aero Engineering, representing Leland on this project. Basically, this is a tentative map just to divide for 4 parcels, and you guys have put together conditions of approval for the project, and Leland Crowley is in agreement with those conditions, so we're not asking for anything special for the city.
Right.
Except for approval. Thank you.
No, nobody comes here for approval, they all want negative comments, right? I don't have any questions or comments either, okay, so, Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications on this item?
No, they're not.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'm gonna open it up for public testimony. If any member of the public wishes to talk about this or bring up any questions regarding this issue, please step forward. You have 3 minutes to speak and only 1 turn at the lectern.
Christy, just a question, what are the plans for the parcels once they're combined? Is it going to be a cannabis industry? Is that what it's going to
Mr.
be?
Krell is heavy into the cannabis industry.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Colleen Gable. We are property owners directly south of this proposed property. As she just found out, it's for proposed cannabis. We live in an area that is very small in California City for ORA, meaning residential agriculture, which we do have livestock there. There's quite a few people in that area. You saw in the picture that have animals and horses and cattle and different things. You can see our place. It's 2 lots that we purchased, one in '04 and one in '02, prior to California legalizing cannabis for our state. We've taken all of that time to develop the area. And while I don't have control over the fact that that whole area north of us is going to be at some point cannabis, I would really appreciate it if you guys would take into consideration into leaving it 1 parcel one parcel with cannabis, while I won't be happy with it, I could probably deal with that somewhat. If you're making that 4 individual parcels, has anybody considered the people who are out there? We do have, you know, equestrians that we ride. You know, what about the traffic? What about the light? What about the horrendous smell? Are any requirements for air scrubbers out there?
Yes, there are.
Well, that's great.
It's state law, they all have to abide by air quality. And there are conditions in place for that, and for the most part, they're charcoal scrubbers.
Okay,
Yeah, there's municipal ordinance against odor as well.
wonderful.
And there is a phone number available if you do have a smell, if there is a smell, there's a
Mhm.
complaint, and the state will send somebody out.
Okay. I don't know. It's difficult when you've been a longtime resident and longtime taxpayer, a longtime special taxpayer, to come in and see the city kind of bending over for special interest. Like I said, I have no control. You guys have already rezoned that. It is light industrial. Cannabis is being allowed, but it would be really, I would appreciate it, as well as some of the others that couldn't make it tonight, to leave it a 1 parcel piece. There's a whole bunch of other land that doesn't impact anybody. This directly negatively impacts me. And to say that you don't have to do some of the studies, I was reading the proposal because I am a adjacent property owner, so I did get notification that there's nothing negative in there. Several years back, the gas company came over and spoke to me. I'm out there on my property riding my horses, and they didn't put in a high pressure gas line over there due to the burrowing owls and the Antelope Valley ground squirrels. I don't know if that is still the case, but at that time it was, and that was very many years back.
Prior to your actual development, they will have to go through a full study.
Are you guys leaning forward to this? I mean, nothing against you guys, but as a longtime resident, it's just,
Excuse me, how close is your home? We talked is
we're right
300,
there.
no, but I'm saying 300 feet, 1,000 feet,
We're the adjacent APN tax,
but you got,
not that one, the one where all the trees are.
So
You guys did get a letter when.
We did get a letter.
When we rezoned it, when we rezoned
No.
it. You should have.
We did get the letter in regards
We
to
did the
the
rezoning, and
subdivision.
we got no negative communications on this.
this has been
Nobody, yeah, there was
this has
nobody
been
here
manufacturing
from
for
the
a while.
to say anything to us.
No.
That-
He's within.
Okay, you know, I don't know,
Their
all I
property's
do
within
know is
300
this
feet.
will negatively impact me.
Yeah.
Also, the fact that the cannabis that's at the end of the street on Neuralia and Minnenboro, I've come to the planning department with negative, concerns. The contractor there tore up the road, also packed all their heavy equipment without any tarps underneath, which I'm sure the Fish and Game would be happy to see my pictures, but I chose not to do that. Also, when I came here and spoke to the city directly, they didn't really seem, actually they acted like they didn't know what I was talking about, to be honest. They're like, we don't have anybody building over there, and it's like, yeah, you do. And then they've made the road an entire mess with their graders. I did talk to the contractor and I said, hey, can you fix the road? I just need to be able to have ingress and egress, and you guys are tearing it up. They kind of said, eh, and I said, well, please, and they're like, eh. And I said, I just watched you drop the blade on your grader and go from Yerba all the way down Minnenboro to Neuralia. I watched you do it. Can you please fix it? Because when it rains, it's going to be underwater. And sure enough, when it rained, I couldn't even get my 4-wheel drive down that road. These are the type of things that I'm not sure if the city's going and checking on or not. But it is a concern of mine, and I do need ingress and egress to my property.
Unfortunately, some of the stuff that you're bringing up is beyond our purview.
Okay,
The only thing we're here to do tonight is to either approve or disapprove the tentative track map.
okay.
The people, I can tell you and Bill, how you doing, Bill? Who to speak to. These folks aren't exactly the people to speak to, although they're part of it. It's the building department that will go out and do the inspections. They're the ones that are ultimately responsible for most of the stuff when it's going up, and code enforcement.
That's who I spoke
Because
with.
with the issue with the tarps, if they were parking heavy equipment and it wasn't bermed, then that is a violation.
No, and I did speak to the planning department. And I understand that I'm kind of getting off task and on a tangent, but I would highly recommend that you guys at least think about how it's going to affect the few of us that have been longtime residents. And I would recommend that you don't approve the tentative.
Let me throw this hypothetical at you, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian. If they leave it at one parcel, he can pack as many buildings in there as he wants to. By breaking it up into 4 parcels, he's now allowing 4 separate businesses in there. I think that's the basic plan.
Yes.
So regardless, he could put in, with one business owner, he could put in 10 or 12 buildings. You're still gonna have the same issue. Whether it's 4 parcels or 1, he could pack it in with as many buildings as he can fit in there legally and do the same thing. So the same result is gonna happen most likely.
So here's my question, since I'm not privy to the fact of what type of businesses are going in there, is it going to be cultivation, is it going to be processing, is it gonna be dispensaries? What am I looking at?
Likely not dispensary, but most likely manufacturing and cultivation. I don't know specifically, but I know that Mr. Krell is in the business, so.
So, but here's my point, if it's one piece, then it would have to be one business. And yes, you could put multiple buildings on one business, but it's one business versus 4 separate businesses.
Agreed, but still, you can do manufacturing, transportation, processing, cultivation, you can do it all under, all you gotta have is a separate license or a separate permit for each one, under one business, or whether it's 4 businesses, it really makes no difference. You can do it on 10 acres, you can do it on 5 acres.
Will a traffic analysis report be done?
That, I can't tell you.
And I
They
think,
might be able to answer that.
So at the site review level, we'll be looking at the effects. This is just to split the
Approve
parcel.
it, right.
Correct. And then just for clarification, this has been manufacturing since I've been here. The zone change that was recent is that kind of spotty one over here that we're actually gonna discuss further tonight. So,
Yeah, the spot change at the end of, on the south side of Minneborough.
right, and
Yeah.
I don't know if that was within 300 feet.
It's not,
Yeah,
it's not.
it was for this property, but again, yeah, we're gonna
Yeah,
talk
no,
further about that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I would appreciate some consideration on my behalf.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, well, I'd like a motion to close public testimony. Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking down and didn't even see you get up.
Mary Trumbull, I just wanted to know, I'm not really familiar with all the requirements to have these places to grow the marijuana and stuff. But I know up next to Deep Well Ranch, they've got a great big,
Yes.
wall fence or something apparently around it. Is that a requirement for all of these places? And would that, if they did that there, would it make things a little better for that lady?
There are great requirements for site. There are site requirements and odor requirements that go along with it. There's all parts of security, and the site requirements are also included in the security requirements.
So those walls have to be put up if in front of residential. So if there's residential, a zone that's visible to the property, that's where they put up the brick walls. That's a requirement under the municipal code.
and then there's a fee, then they have to be so many feet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 200 feet, you cannot do cannabis business within 200 feet of a residential zone. So we're actually going to discuss that as well tonight. Right now, that barrier, so that means if her property starts here, then theoretically he would have to have a building 200 feet away from that.
From her property.
Exactly.
That's her property.
And that's what, again, we're going to discuss more about that tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, Brian.
I just wanted to add a couple things. One is that one of the conditions for the project would be to build a paved road. So that's going to help with the road conditions out there. And it's also true that whether this is split as 4 or it's one parcel, they're gonna pack in as many buildings as possible to, again, get the most efficiency for mainly gonna be growing sites here, but I anticipate they could have a manufacturing, but mainly grow sites.
Okay. All right, now, like a motion to close public testimony.
I'll make a motion to close public testimony.
Second, please.
Second.
All right, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, commissioners, discussion time. Nothing?
How many homes where this lady lives are affected by this up front?
Colleen, you guys don't live there now, do you? Aren't you still back in the other?
Yes,
Okay, this is just where you have the horses, right?
with the intent to build out there.
Okay.
Do you know, is there anybody in this property?
Yes,
People live there.
people live there.
So that is a home? Okay.
Yeah.
So it looks like there's just one home.
Actually,
Direct-
there's
directly.
three.
Oh, there's
There's
three.
1, 2, 3 homes.
Three. Kind of boxes.
I don't know if I'm understanding it correctly. Didn't this issue come up several months ago about agreeing to have the cannabis and rezoning? And we heard nothing from anybody out there. So we went ahead based on that there wasn't anybody there.
I was unaware that, I'm sorry, I
No,
don't
I don't
stay
want you to be
abreast of
sorry.
all
I'm
your
saying that
all of your
We're
meetings.
sorry, but we can't undo what's already done.
We're kind of boxed in this way, now that we zoned a certain thing, regardless, even if it wasn't cannabis, it's
It's
district
been light
is zoned for a
industrial for a
specific
long
thing.
time.
And we can't dictate what they put within that box. So
That's not what I'm asking.
for the cannabis, they have some zoning, distances and things they have to do. But the only way we would have been able to get away from this would have been if we'd had people that would have sat down before. It's kind of, as much as you try to help, if nobody shows up, you don't have an idea if somebody's gonna contest or if you wanna move in a different direction.
So I'm kind of just confused by those comments. I understand exactly where you're coming from. But that's been zone light industrial for a very, very long time.
But that's what we do. We change zones. When businesses come and other things come here and they say, we wanna build this or that, and they say, we need to rezone that. And then they present their case and we rezone it if we feel it's the best for the city. With the fact that you were not here, I'm sorry that you weren't, but if you had been, maybe we would have thought differently about it. But coming now is kind of like the bell has already been rung. You can't unring it. As much as we'd like to, but, I don't know that we can.
If I can clarify a little bit, I think she asked, or she's requesting that this parcel map not be approved, so it remains just one parcel, thus having only one business instead of 4.
I get that, but like Jim said, it doesn't matter. They could put 100 buildings on that thing, even if it's one parcel. I think the advantage of having it divided into 4 is that there are less restrictions.
Mhm.
If they have a big building, they have to have certain amount of
Yeah, you can-
sprinklers and all that.
Well, he could
Which
sell
they-
these off then as well, as 4 separate parcels.
And it breaks it down whether you have one investor or you have 4 investors.
Right.
And it doesn't change the fact of how many can be put on there. It just, you get more people involved versus you get one person, you'll have one person control it all. It doesn't change the outcome. As much as we'd like to see it change for you, I don't think either way, it wouldn't change.
Any more discussion by commission?
Okay, that's it for me.
Nothing from me.
All right, at this time, do I have a motion by any of the commissioners to either approve or disapprove?
Make the motion that we approve this.
Anybody second?
I'll second it.
Madam Secretary, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Trumbull,
Yes.
Commissioner Macedonio,
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Chair Creighton.
Yes. Okay, public hearing number 2.
Yes. Chairman Creighton, members of the commission, this is the time and the place for a public hearing. This is also a parcel map, 12324. Applicant is Michael Ellison, who's also represented by Mr. Glidden. This property is 2.85 acres. It's located south of Lake Place in the general airport vicinity north of Lindbergh Boulevard. It's actually where Von Braun Way is split, a very wide median, if you will. The intent on this property is to actually put it into 5 smaller parcels, ranging in size from, I believe, a specific number. They're ranging in size from about half an acre to a little larger, 3/4 of an acre. There is correspondence on this particular project. You have a letter from Ray Seide, who owns property, actually, Mr. Seide owns property right around here, which was rezoned about a year ago to M from commercial. That was one of the independent, as you recall, you rezoned about 57 properties in the general airport area at one time last August. But Mr. Seide, along with this property, Mr. Ellison, they did the independent rezoning last year. Mr. Seide owns this property, and in his letter, basically, he's asking for public improvements along some of these streets in the general neighborhood. It's the opinion of our city engineer that we don't have the ability to make improvements. We can require the improvements adjacent to the project, which is a condition of the site plan approval, or condition of the parcel map approval. But we cannot require, for example, streetlights down here, or other sidewalks, or other improvements that don't directly relate to the parcel map before you.
And if I remember right, some of the stuff he's requesting is already in there as conditions of approval.
Yes, yeah, it is. So with that, the staff would recommend that the planning commission approve this tentative parcel map with the conditions contained in the resolution. And that would conclude our staff report.
All right, commissioners, any questions for either Mr. Glidden or staff? I did read that some of the stuff that he was asking was a little excessive. It seemed quite a bit. He literally wanted the entire place developed.
Right.
And that's just not gonna happen. You can't lay that on a contractor or a developer. No. Anybody have any questions or anything to bring up?
I have none. So they're looking for this, aside from approval, they don't want to do any improvements on or they want the city to?
No. There's one property owner who's up there in the top left. He's asking for excessive developments or improvements outside the purview of what the developer, inside the red area, or adjacent to the red area. He's asking for improvements that are not even close to that.
So improvements that the city has to undertake?
No, the developer.
The developer would have to absorb.
Okay. So, that would be on us then. Okay,
Yeah, all around the boundaries of this tentative parcel map, we're requiring half street improvements on all 4 sides. Well, there already is some on Lindbergh, but on the others, he has to put in the streets. And also, curb gutter, sidewalk and grading in accordance with the city standards for street construction.
All right, Madam Secretary, any reports or any communications on this? Other than Mr. Saidi's letter?
No, there are none.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, at this time, we'll open it up for public testimony. Anybody wishing to speak on this, please come forward. You have 3 minutes. 3, 2, 1, that's done. All right, can I get a motion to close public testimony?
I'll make the motion, we close public testimony.
Second, please.
I'll second it.
You all in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained? All right. Commissioner discussion. Anybody have anything on this item?
No, I don't.
Go ahead, Si. All right, yeah, my only thing is the same thing, that you alluded to earlier, was that, what the letter is requesting is a little off base. So, I mean, I read through the conditions of approval, they seem pretty fine to me. So I have no comments or questions on this item. So at this time, I'm looking for a motion to either approve or disapprove this tentative parcel map.
I'll make a motion to accept this tentative partial map 12/3/24.
I'll second that.
Madam Secretary, please, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Trumbull,
Yes.
Commissioner Macedonia,
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan,
Yes.
Chair Creighton,
Yes.
motion carried.
I'm going to go a little bit off track here, only because I know that one of the proponents of the next issue is either running late or may not make it at all. If anybody could text DJ to see if he's going to make it at all. Why don't we start with, I'd like to, if everybody's okay with it, start with discussion item 4. And then if Mr. Tui's not here at that time, we're going to go back to 1, 2, and 3, if nobody has any objection. This is going to be a very quick discussion on item 4.
Sean would like to object.
It's a joke. All right. All right, so discussion item 4 is consideration of tattoo parlor as permitted use in community commercial C2 zone district. Staff?
Yes, sir. A few weeks ago, we had an individual from Aspen Mall call, and there's a barber shop that evidently went out of business, and the folks that would like to come in and take over that property have a tattoo parlor. And so the first thing you do when you want to check out and make sure the use is appropriate is you look in the zoning ordinance, and for the C2 commercial, we found that tattoo parlors were not called out as a permitted use, nor were they called out as a conditionally permitted use. So we have a conundrum, and as was pointed out in the staff report, when you write a zoning ordinance, you cannot possibly contemplate every possible use that's going to come in. And the example we gave is if the zoning ordinance was prepared in 1970.
One second. You're not that late. We just jumped it to 4. We're going to go back to 1. All right. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Matt.
Sorry, guys.
So So we use the example of a computer store. In 1970, you didn't have any computer stores around. So you can't always consider everything. Now, most cities will have a statement in the zoning ordinance that says, for permitted uses, uses that are similar to and no more objectionable than other uses that are permitted as approved by the planning commission. And that certainly makes life a lot easier for everyone. In this particular case, the staff looked at it, tattoos are very popular this day and age. Not as popular as when you were a young man and had your tattoo in the service, Mr. Chairman, but they become mainstream. And we don't see, frankly, much difference between a tattoo parlor or a barber shop or a beauty shop, and those are permitted uses. So we're coming to the planning commission to request your consent for the staff to handle tattoo parlors in Aspen Mall as a permitted use.
Let me just say, my tattoos aren't that old. Second of all, Commissioner Trumbull may remember this too. We got a briefing. The city manager used to come to the planning commission meetings, and I think it was back in either 17 or 18, 16 or 17, I believe it was. There was a tattoo parlor that was supposed to go in Aspen Mall, and it was approved at the SDR level, not at our level. We were just briefed that it was coming, so I don't see where the issue is. Personally, I don't see it, but there is a statement similar to that, what you were talking about, in our ordinance, and it does state something that it can be considered along the same lines, basically. We did a text amendment about 3 years ago for that. So, commissioners, any questions, comments?
I have none. I'm not getting any tattoos, so it's not gonna affect
If
me.
he's any good, I'll check him out. But
No, I mean, that's the new wave.
But I don't know if the new.
Well, I mean,
is-
nowadays, a lot of the places you see, they're upper end salons, like anything you would see, hair salons or anything else. I'm not sure, you know, if we're getting so far off the path here that, you know, you're gonna see, you know, that it'll be degrading the neighborhood by any means. I think it might not be that bad.
I think a CUP would be favorably
Yeah.
looked on here.
You prefer a CUP?
Well, we could change it to make it a permitted use, but that's, change to the ordinance.
Okay. Well, again, it's not called out, so.
Do we,
But there is part of the ordinance that says, yeah, if it's similar, we can do it as a CUP. I don't see anything wrong with that.
Okay.
Is there an applicant right now on hold somewhere?
Yes.
That wants to open up a
Correct.
tattoo parlor?
Yes.
There is.
Yes, sir.
I don't know, I think most of the board here would be favorable. I don't know if you wanna change, if there's any little bit of language that it would make you guys feel a little better about it.
Well, again, we were hoping, because the staff sees this as a rather benign use, so we're hoping that you would concur that it's similar to and no different, no more objectionable than beauty shop, barber shop, and therefore they would not have to go through all the rigors of the CUP.
I don't know if our ordinances allow us to just inject tattoo parlors in there as permitted use. Does it?
Well, we were,
Or does the ordinance need to be changed to specifically call it out?
well, if I were king of the world, I'd change the ordinance to say, that's a phrase I've been repeating.
Same as.
When it's similar to and no more objectionable than. Because again, you can't consider every single possible use. And that way, if we have something down the road, similar, where it's not called out, it may not be, if it's a CUP, then they're gonna do a CUP.
Right.
But if it's not either, and you are on board with it, it's not being any more objectionable, then we could do it this way, just as a minute order of the planning commission. But, we must say that it's not, that language is not in there now. And again, so it's not clear as to how we handle it.
Would any of the commissioners object to it being a permitted item or considered a permitted item, no less objectionable than a beauty parlor or barber shop, and things of that nature. I mean, some people call it skin beautification, some people call it skin art, some people call it other things, but, you know, it is what it is to the person wearing them.
I have no objection.
I think the CUP might be the way to go.
I see nothing worse or the language that they have, I don't see when they go through as under that stipulation, then if it comes through us, I don't think that, I wouldn't be against it.
So
Language he's
basically,
talking about.
we're 3-1 unpermitted, so
That's okay, I can change my vote, make them all happy.
let them go ahead.
If it's not, I mean, if the planning department is recommending this, the way to go, then I guess that's the way we should go.
Well-
That's your recommendation?
Again, we don't see any downside to it.
Okay.
Revenue's revenue, right? Well,
Yes.
okay, so you have your direction on that.
Okay?
So now we'll go back up to discussion item 1. Accessory dwelling units and tiny homes. Staff, you're up.
Yes, right. So we're actually covering two topics in this discussion item. One, of course, is tiny homes, which has been on the agenda before. We also wanted to update you regarding accessory dwelling units. And sometimes they're interchangeable, sometimes they're not. But regarding the city's code right now, this is important to understand that, you know, we do allow second units. Some cities make it very difficult to put a second unit, sometimes called a granny flat. This is where you can put a second unit on your lot in the backyard. And here's what our code says right now. And by the way, I spoke to the building official today. He said in the last 5 years, there's been about 2 second units that have been reviewed and approved. So we do have an interest in them. And in just a moment, I'm going to tell you what the new state law says, and that's going to change our ordinance. You'll see some of the things here are going to have to be amended January 1st to be consistent with the state. But right now, you have to get a building permit. Okay? Your second unit has to be a minimum 500 square feet. It cannot be any larger than 1,000 square feet. It has to have independent ingress and egress. So in other words, you don't have to go through the main primary building. So that would lend itself to really a second family or a second individual living in the second unit. You have to hook up to the resident sewer system. So you cannot have a septic for the second unit. You may not have independent water, electric, or gas. And finally, the only other caveat in our ordinance right now is the square footage included with the primary residence for lot coverage. So in other words, if it's a 6,000 square foot lot, sometimes you can't exceed 40% of lot coverage. So you put them together, and that's how you come up with the maximum for the second unit. Now, state of California, because as you know, housing we're in such a critical crisis in the state. We have more homeless people now than ever before. It's just more and more difficult for middle income, low income people to find a decent house to live in. The state finally took action, and there's been a number of different assembly bills that have been passed that are changing the rules in all the cities and the counties in the state. So this is what it says now. Now, doesn't matter what, the city of Arvin says or the city of Bakersfield, the maximum setback you can have is 4 feet from the property line. And the reason for that is just safety. You want to be able to get fire crew, somebody there. So you do have to have a setback, but that's the maximum setback you can have is 4 feet. You don't have to replace parking. What they mean by that is if someone wants to make the second unit their garage, 100 square foot garage, in some cities they say, well, you gotta come up with 2 new parking spaces on the lot possibly another garage. You don't have to do that anymore. If you wanna turn a garage into a second unit, you can do that without having to, produce more parking on the lot. There is no maximum or minimum ADU size. So what you saw just a moment ago with our minimum 500 to 1,000, that's out the window. So there's no maximums or minimums for the second unit. There is no requirement, which some cities have, I didn't see it for us, but you have to be an owner occupant to actually have the primary residence, obviously, of that lot. That's not the case anymore. So in other words, if you're a landlord and you have rental property, in your primary unit, you can also build a second unit and use that for rental too. In some cases, there have been CC&Rs or deeds that prohibit second units in certain snob neighborhoods. That's out the window too. You can't do that anymore. Homeowners associations, they also cannot prohibit ADUs on single-family lots. Now, that's not the same if you're talking about condominiums and common land areas. It's a little different with there, but this is where people own a single-family home. And finally, agencies cannot impose fees if it's under 750 square feet. So if you want to build one in Ridgecrest, I know, that one I don't know.
Can you explain that?
Well,
That doesn't make sense to me. What kind of fees are they saying you can't impose? Any?
building fees, yeah. Or could be impact fees.
Under 750 feet.
Yeah, I understand them under, but I'm saying what fees? I'm asking what fees?
I took it to mean all fees, but we can do more research. Maybe it talks about development impact fees, and it would not apply to building fees. I don't know. Find that out.
So do you need a building permit?
You need a building.
So that's a fee?
So on this, you wouldn't be able to charge them a building fee.
Well, if that's correct, yes.
Yeah, we'll
That's
have,
only ADUs though.
yeah, I believe you can't put a specific ADU fee on there. I mean, we'll double check on the clarification
just-
on this.
Clarification, okay. Is that the end of your presentation?
On second units, yes.
Okay, all right, we'll do the accessory dwelling units first, and then we'll move on to tiny home as the second part of this discussion. Commissioners, any questions on ADUs?
This new state law throws everything out that we have. Basically, I mean, keeping it to a minimum, and now you don't have no ADU sizes or anything. Kind of throws everything we got out the door. And this is starting first of the year?
Yes.
Correct.
So you have 26 days to get it done. Anyway, any commissioners?
Can these tiny homes be?
We're not talking tiny homes.
What are they?
ADUs, we're talking
Oh, okay.
ADUs right now.
We're talking about like converting your garage into a.
Or building a home
building
up back to your
something,
grandma.
putting
your
a
mother-in-law.
container in the backyard.
Yeah, only certain residents can do
Yeah,
that.
incidentally, the mother-in-law part was struck down several years ago.
Yeah,
Okay, so these ADUs and tiny homes are not related at any level.
Except a
correct?
tiny home could, with this new legislation,
Well,
you can't prohibit them
But
as
this
an
will
ADU.
apply to tiny homes also, right?
But tiny homes could fit
As
as
an
an
ADU. Yes.
ADU, as an auxiliary.
Yeah, because number 3 there says no minimum or maximum size.
Because
So
that
that
was
means you can
the
do that.
primary thing, most people wanted the tiny homes that they could put
we're
it.
talking about ADUs, gentlemen, let's bring it back to ADUs.
But tiny homes as an ADU
Yeah.
does pertain to this.
We need to identify them separately, so I'd like to work them separately.
Okay.
My questions or comments, so section 9-2.307 of our current muni code is where we're gonna put this, right? We're gonna have all issues regarding anything under 1,000 square feet in here, basically.
Right.
So, the way I see it, we need to identify the processes of how we're gonna outline the issue of ADUs within the muni code.
Hasn't
We
really
need-
been outlined for us there.
Kind of, with the state laws changing, we're probably gonna do, okay, one thing I don't understand, must-use primary residence sewer system. What if the primary residence is a septic tank? You gotta run a septic line from a backyard all the way to the front tank? That is ludicrous.
What that says to me is that you should not be running a separate line. But if there's a sewer line coming into the main residence, you wanna tap into that for your
We don't
sewer.
have a
Yeah,
sewer
we
system.
don't have sewer on most of the properties in Cal City. Most of the properties in Cal City are on septic tank.
Yeah, I would read that I read this as you would be required to tie into the septic tank or build your own.
Well, it's a sewer system, so
Yeah, so if there's no coverage.
sewer system is septic, then, yeah.
But I know some people put their septics in the front, they were put in the front with a special, well, I don't know, when my son was doing them, they were putting them in the front yard. So when you put a building in the back, how do they tie in?
You have to go all the way around the house.
You gotta run a hundred and
I
twenty
mean-
foot sewer line.
It becomes,
That's a lot of drop.
yeah, I mean, that's just,
Can't do it sometimes, so.
you
I'm
just
building-
wouldn't be able to.
I'm building one right now, or getting the plans approved in Lancaster for a secondary unit. It's an ADU and a garage all in one. And LA County is permitting me to put a separate septic tank and leach field in the back.
So literally that'd be a case by case basis. We'd have to approve a separate septic tank.
Well, that would, I believe that's building department.
Yeah, I understand. I
You have to have the
understand.
lot size to
Doesn't
be able
make
to
sense.
accomplish it too.
And the county's in control there for septic, not the city. So I had to go through LA County Public Health, and that's how I got the approval.
But the way that's written,
All right.
it'd have to be.
Commissioners, any other questions on this?
with the
Okay,
new
right
state- with the
now,
new state
I'm gonna
law,
open it up to the
really
public only,
limited on what is required.
only on ADUs. We're not talking tiny homes yet.
Only on ADUs. Christy Munn, I have experience with this. I built a granny flat ADU in my backyard in El Cajon in 2005 for my parents. 500 square feet. I had to put an extra parking pad in front for them. So I've been through all this, and it's a wonderful idea that they are accepting these because, as you said, there's so many people in this state that cannot afford housing. And my plan originally was that I built that 500 square foot house for my parents and took care of them until they died. And I was going to move into that 500 square foot and rent my house out and let them pay my mortgage since I was retired. Unfortunately, life happened and that didn't happen. Then I ended up here getting my parents' land that they had from 1963. So I think it's a wonderful idea. It worked out wonderful for me. And as you said, something in there about it's added to the square footage of the house. My house down there, my house was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,300 square foot. You look at the listing now, it says 4-bedroom, 3-bath, 1,800 square feet. So it includes that granny flat square footage into the main house as a listing. But then it says multiple unit home. But I'm all in favor, but most of you don't hear, I've been in favor of tiny houses for a long time. I want to
This is not a
spend,
tiny house. This is an ADU.
this is
Totally
eight,
different.
I know it's totally different, but I already had one.
I get that part.
So,
You've already told
I-
us this story
I
several
agree
times.
with the fact that if somebody wants to do this, this is something we should make available to them.
I don't think that we have a choice. This is what the government of California has
They,
deemed.
they finally have woke up that
I don't know
we
if they
need
woke up. If they
we-
woke up,
we
there wouldn't
need
be a homeless problem.
smaller houses for more people to have affordable housing to live in. And this is one way of getting, even people that own their home and wanna make extra income, they can build this and rent it out. That's a way to make an extra income if you're on a fixed income. And, like I said, tiny houses is another whole thing. I would like to build a 600 square foot house, but the ordinance now is 1,200 square feet, so I just think the ADUs is something that, with our quarter acre lots, the majority of people here have a quarter acre. I had a quarter acre in El Cajon and that I had like a park. Of course, I was in the key of the cul-de-sac, so I had a huge yard, plenty of room for everybody to be there. And I just think it's something that, like I say, state's requiring it now. Just make it as easy as possible for people to do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. ADU. Okay, just something came to mind that I'd like to clarify with respect to the assembly bills. All of those have been signed off. All 4 of those are signed off. And does our local policy get any latitude on any part of that land use policy, or can we make it any more stringent or any less stringent at the local level?
What I learned in school is that a city is a creature of the state, and so I believe the answer would be no.
Because of the intent of the bill,
Yes,
and the bill's analysis is to limit the city's role here.
correct.
Understood.
But I don't think the state had a lot of problems with a place like Cal City. I mean,
Yeah.
we will be more lenient January 1st, but there are some cities where they did all kinds of things to prohibit
To
second
prohibit
use,
it, yeah.
period, yeah.
Even if it didn't say prohibited, the way they've written the land use policy prohibits it. So then a couple distinctions to drill down. I saw that there was no minimum or no maximum on the state. And so if you go to the California City proposed ordinance,
Well, that's not proposed, that's in fact, that's in place.
this is the one that's in place.
This is the one that's in place.
Got it, okay. And so we don't have, I suppose in ours will mirror the state.
Well, we don't have, ours doesn't say ADU, ours says second home.
But we've got some language to change apparently.
Yes, that's what we're
This is
looking
the
at.
section specifically that you referred to.
Yeah, basically, this would have to change what you see right there.
Right, okay.
To go with the state laws.
To mirror the state. And so with respect to the comments about independent water, electric, and gas, can we flip back to the state and see if that's also required?
No.
There's no comment. So we need to determine if we're going to remove that subsection. Because one of the advantages of ADU is to possibly consider something solar for the ADU. And so if we say it may not have its own electric, you're really creating a larger carbon footprint.
By independent, I think it meant metered. I think the intent in the city was it can't be independently metered.
Understood. So
That's what I
yeah,
think.
we want to, I imagine for the environmentally friendly, we want to encourage the solar, right? And so we wouldn't want that to be discouraged in our local land use policy. By the way, I wanted to thank staff for all the information on ADU.
Anybody else on this? All right, commissioners, anything you want to bring up? I have one quick thing that's been bugging me on this. If we allow these, well, we need to allow these. On R1, the lot sizes are relatively small. We need to say which residential area, or what size lot, what minimum size lot we're going to allow these on. Because, I mean, my original lot, before I merged with the lot beside me, there's no way. I would have literally nothing to do in my backyard if I put in a 500 to 1,000 square foot second home, additional dwelling unit, whatever we're gonna call it, which we'll call it ADUs as opposed to second homes, but the lot sizes are exceptionally small for R1 in most cases. So we need to figure out, that's one of the things we need to come up with commission is where we're gonna permit these.
Yeah, I'm not sure the way they write that we can It's like if you can fit
Yeah, I
a
see.
building on it, you can put it there,
I
is
see
what
what
they're
you mean.
really,
It's the floor
I'm not
area.
sure how that,
The floor area is the control. X floor area. Setback is 4 feet.
4 feet, you could put it, you put it on somebody's lot line, you're looking into the next person's house. I mean, theoretically, you'd have the second home looking in your kitchen. That's how close you, I don't know, man. I know they do that because it's the city and they're struggling with finding places to stuff homes. But it's really hard to get jammed up here where we have space, where we don't have to, we could, but we're being directed by the state. I'm not sure any legal ways where we can maneuver here. Even with lot sizes, I mean, doesn't mean they'll have a lot. I mean, they won't have a play area or a spare area on their lot. They'll just have 2 dwellings,
4 feet.
right? I mean, as long as it's 4 feet off the property line, because we have some pretty small lots here. If you put 2 small dwellings, you could pack it right to every corner of the lot. It's not that we want that. I wouldn't like to see that in my neighborhood, where they're squeezed into every boundary line.
Yeah, but if it's,
But if it's mandated,
allowed by state law.
yeah, I'm not sure we put this in and we live with it because it's driven the way it is. The only thing, some of the, like I said, with like Jim, I think some of the utilities, I'm not sure how we change, how they do some of these utilities. We'll have to
They
change.
just have to tie
How-
into the main house.
Well, I'll
Yeah,
tell
but
you,
not everywhere you can do that.
like at my house,
What
I
do you
got
mean, as far as the septic? No.
Septic, oh,
Well,
just,
like,
yeah, some things.
Brian said, he's gonna do a separate septic.
But like I said, our language, we'll have to modify some language that will allow, if the lot permits it, that they can put a second one in. But if you got a lot that's squeezing every part of it, and they don't have a leach line, you can't get it in. I mean, it changes.
Up to the governor.
And I know when they put a lot of them earlier, a lot of homes here where they did septic systems in the front part where they did a certain kind of systems, a lot of them failed. They had a tremendous amount of trouble with the septic systems, just speaking on that part of it.
okay. So
I don't know.
we need to come up with new verbiage on, 9 dash,
I think we
2.307.
should table this.
well, we need to, Matt, is there any other language or anything else in those, in the, assembly bills that say, other than those 7 items?
No, this is a summary.
Oh, there's a summary, so there's a lot more stuff in there. All right,
That wasn't good news.
well, I mean,
We can send out the complete bills to the commissioners.
yeah, that's what I was gonna suggest. Email us the, all 4 bills, read through them,
And
put this back on, the ADU part back on next commission meeting, and we'll discuss this again. Is there anybody else from the public, before I,
Karen Macedonio, just really quickly, as I did a Google search, they said that a big challenge here is the banks haven't figured out how they're going to handle ADUs in a finance package. So one of the things that you might want to reach out to is the banking industry.
Nope.
And find out, no, because if we don't line up with what they are, then we're gonna end up doing this a second time.
not in our purview?
Yeah, that's not.
Refinancing is not in our purview.
No, I'm not talking about financing, I'm talking about what are their requirements gonna be.
it won't matter. The state issued that they can do this.
Exactly.
However, people choose to find the money to do what they need to do, then that's what's gonna happen.
If you're talking about the banks, you're talking about the banks financing a mortgage, right, or financing construction loans? That's between the developer, the homeowner, and the bank, not us. I mean, however they get it up, they get it up. As long as it meets building requirements.
I have about a third of an acre. Is there any limit on the number of these homes? Or I'd probably pick 4 in my backyard. Just a question.
Yeah,
We'll let you know after we read all 4 bills, how's that?
Sounds like a
But
plan.
I'll bet you there's probably gonna limit it to 1.
Yeah, so that's,
Let me see, you got 3 properties, I can put it.
And I have a question too, and maybe Matthew, you could help, is, you know, if somebody, let's say, is just completing their secondary house right now, what are the rules come January first? Do those all, does it go retroactive back?
Your grandfather kind of,
Yeah.
In other
my
words,
best
if
guess that
you had to be an
grandfather.
owner occupant in the main house today, and you just got that secondary house done, January first, you could then rent the first house? How does that work?
As far as I know, that would make sense. It's like, we're struggling with the current codes. It really doesn't matter after January 1st, the state is gonna supersede us.
No, what I think Brian's question is, if, say I finish construction, I get an occupancy certificate on 15 December. Come January 1, do I have to comply with the new rules, or am I grandfathered into the old ones? I would assume you grandfathered into the old ones. Anything existing prior to should
January
be okay.
1st.
So the question is, you know, would you wait then till January first to get approval? Because like in my case, they're running me through a full director's review. It's like a site plan review, just doesn't have to go to public hearing, but, you know, come January first, everything changes.
you might wanna do it now.
I don't know.
You know, what if I
I'll
wanted to
send you
rent
the
the main
state-
house?
I'll send you the state,
All right, so
laws.
we'll carry this one over to the next planning commission meeting.
And one other thing I wanted to
Sure.
mention too, is these ADU rules keep changing. So whatever you guys do, you might wanna be dynamic or, you know, try to refer back to the state rules in your rules so that you don't have to keep changing over and over again. Because already, you know, there were special considerations for the ADU when I started this a year ago that the state had put down. So governor just keeps changing
Good
this
point.
stuff
So
all the
instead of
time.
putting specifics in it, we'll say, refer to state law.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Anybody else from the public? Because we're gonna switch over to the next one. So get us those 4 bills, put it on again. Hopefully we'll all get a chance to read them between now and then. All right, so the second part of this is the tiny home section.
Okay.
Tiny homes are different in that they're smaller than ADUs, generally speaking. And they come in 2 classes. You got stick-built and you got on wheels. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'd like Mr. Monk to share this portion with me. So we just wanted to, we know that this has been discussed at the planning commission before. We know that there's some anxiety as to why we're not moving forward with an ordinance. Just want to tell you that it's difficult. Got over 500 cities in California. We've called some of them. I talked to the people at the governor's office of planning and research. I've contacted the State Department of Housing and Urban Development. I cannot find a city in California that has adopted a tiny home ordinance. There are tiny home projects that have gone in different cities. City of Ventura, they put together a tiny home project of about 20 units for the homeless. They've done some things in the city of Los Angeles. But we just want to stress to the Planning Commission that there are a lot of issues that come up with tiny homes. It's not, and if it was easy, more cities would have done it by now. It's not that cities aren't interested in moving forward, but we just want to caution you from the onset that it's not an easy thing to bring about. So one thought we want to leave with you is, in the opinion of the staff, the most ideal situation will be something like a planned unit development. Okay? And the city of Cal City already has legislation in the ordinance that allows planned unit developments. So, for example, you could, I'll just reference the section of the code. You don't have to wait for a tiny home ordinance to take advantage of what's in the code right now. And it's pretty simple at this point. Planned unit development. An overlay permit may be issued for at least 10 acres. They have to have 10 acres, contiguous property, within residential zones. It has to be residentially zoned. The permit shall include the following conditions. The number of dwelling units on commercials, the number of dwelling units within the development does not exceed the number of dwellings permitted by the underlying zoning. So in other words, if the zoning is, let's say 10 acres, let's say you have 60 lots, and it's zoned single family, you can't have more than 60 tiny homes. But the assumption is under a PUD, you're gonna have some common areas, you're gonna have some common recreation, you're gonna have some common, amenities, like a clubhouse, maybe a basketball court, things for the public. And it's my own personal belief that if you're gonna subject people to live in a unit the size of your garage, 400 square feet, you better well make some opportunities available to them. Personally, I think it would be a great mistake to start putting these small units, scatter them randomly throughout the city, because what have you accomplished? You've got an inexpensive unit because it's small, but what have you really done for the people that are gonna be living there? Just a thought. So clearly, the staff is behind doing planned developments, and we have that already in the ordinance. Once you do a PUD, you don't have to have the minimum 1,200 square foot footprint that is required in single family homes right now.
So if you're doing a planned development, the minimum 1,000 square foot goes away, or 1,200 square foot goes away?
Yes, yeah. It does. There's no setback requirements. It's just, that's why it's called planned unit development. You can cluster the units and, have common open space.
You said you wanted to partner with Sean on this. Did you have
Yes.
anything to add?
Not right now. Matt pretty much said it all. This is just an example of a planned unit development that I found where they've clustered the tiny homes down here and then allowed for larger homes up here for almost, it's not a mixed use, but a mixed sized residential development. But you could do this mixed use as well. But to point out what Matt's talking about, they have the clubhouse here, plenty of common areas, because the issue is if you have a small living space there, and in doing some research towards tiny homes, there has been a lot of flare-ups between neighbors complaining about, someone down here when you're in close proximity, whereas if you give them an opportunity to have a common area, some entertainment, tennis, basketball court, that might alleviate some of the tension, build community more, have these community aspects rather than just, neighbors living that close to each other. So that's kind of the theory behind having a more common PUD development.
Neighborhood poker games.
Right, yeah. And that, especially if you want to do like a senior development, 55 or older, those are just examples.
And then this is an example of a tiny home that is actually an ADU as well. As you can see, it's back from the main primary residence.
God, my shed's bigger.
I put this slide in because Sean wanted it in. It makes a social statement.
I put it in, there are a lot of challenges, and that's why cities don't have a lot of tiny homes yet, or ordinances yet, because under the size of a normal house, it's too small to put on one lot. So cities are trying to work through this. This picture is from a blog of someone who actually got their tiny home was evicted from a friend's backyard. So.
The issue with, that one's tiny home on wheels, so you got an issue with height. You can't exceed 13 foot 6 inches. Is there, correct me if I'm wrong, do you answer the question, on the square footage, it's just the base, or are you considering any loft space as well as part of square footage?
For the total square footage, I would include the loft, but again, you don't have the minimums or maximums anymore.
That's ADU, not tiny home.
How about the footprint
But
of a tiny home?
Well, on an RV, it can't be any more than 8.5 feet wide.
One that's on the ground.
Yeah.
There's no requirement, there's no minimum, no maximum, it's just whatever you want.
But tiny home is 400 square foot or less, correct?
Yeah, right now in the city, I believe you can't have anything smaller than 1,200 square feet.
And a tiny home is what, Jim? 400?
400 or less.
That's
That's
the
what
number
I
that
read.
somebody took as a definition.
Yeah, that's what I read.
I thought it was like 400 to 800 somewhere. I thought there was a window. No. Well,
You guys have anything else to ask them, because I'm gonna open up to the public.
didn't we discuss some areas through,
Yes.
going through different areas that,
Yeah, that map.
that we talked
Yeah,
about,
that's
that
coming up.
people threw out that we could make a planned area?
Yeah,
And-
here's a more example of a smaller area that still has community.
Yeah.
A community, so we could potentially do this on a lot that's not full 20 acres or something.
But now, with the tiny homes, is the state mandating any specific things that, or that can be where we can drive that?
Yeah, because these are standalone units on a lot potentially, or we could do another planned unit, which there's still. If you notice here, here's another example of a planned unit community. Each one of these is a lot.
Right.
So if we would also have to amend the zone, the city code to allow smaller lots, because right now this would be smaller than what's allowed in code. But under a PUD, you could potentially build these and rent these out unit by unit.
Okay, my last question. Weren't we required to have something in place by a certain date? We're supposed to be coming up.
I believe you're thinking of the ADU requirements that we just spoke about.
Yeah, but Sean brings up a good point because, and it's something the commission might want to consider. We pointed out that the state law for ADUs says that you cannot make it a requirement that it's owner occupied. But if the commission is going to pursue the concept of having random tiny homes throughout the city, if you were to do that, we believe that it would be important to make it required to be owner occupied, because otherwise you run the risk of having a slumlord come in and just renting it in and out. Whereas at least if you have it owner occupied, in our opinion, that would be much more
Or a
likely.
designated area.
But
Right.
you basically run that risk no matter what rental property you have. I mean,
Even in the ADUs to some extent.
okay.
And one thing we just wanted to add, the commission should really think through who are we building these tiny homes for? Because you're not doing it for families.
No.
Right off the get-go. It's gonna be singles or maybe couples.
But we won't need a basketball court.
I don't think you should have, because Housing and Urban Development has guidelines on overcrowding. And I know that you couldn't have a family of 4 living in a 400 square foot apartment. It just,
But what would you do if you built these, if somebody built these and developed a community, and then you had a family of 4 or
Right.
wanted to move in?
well, that's why you have to really think through who we're building them for and what it. We have code enforcement. I think that would be a nightmare to try to enforce. Because you could say this is just my cousin Billy who's here for the weekend. I mean,
Right, exactly.
how in the world
So-
do you enforce something like that?
It's a Pandora's box, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Anybody from the public, I'm sure
So-
there's at least 3 people who want to get up and talk.
Okay,
I'm
so
sorry.
one more thing.
Hang on, hold on, guys.
Here's your map.
Well, so these are potential locations that staff and potential developers came up with. So we are right here. This is City Hall. Here's the airport, and this is a tract that's directly below what we just rezoned as a city rezoning initiative on the airport. So this area would be prime for potential seasonal workers for cannabis, similar for 2898. We could potentially do a pilot project in those areas to where we only allow maybe a couple lots or an area of it to allow tiny homes. These lots also down here, they're haven't really built out hardly at all. There's no houses on either or any of these down here, so that could be a potential to reactivate those lots. This is the mobile home park. There's also a mobile home park over here. We could allow those to also just drop a tiny home or back it in if you want to do a more or on wheels. You could allow that in the mobile home parks. It wouldn't be really a change of use at all. And then the Legends up here is also a potential area, but that would have to go through the channels because it is part of our housing corporation, and they have a completely separate board. So again, these are just kind of sketched out areas that we've come up with for a potential PUD or overlay.
So you wanna designate how many areas for tiny home building, is that what you wanna do?
This is just a discussion tonight, so if you want to maybe highlight an area you want to focus on, or it's all kind of up in the air.
Yeah, we wouldn't recommend that you take all of these, that we would,
No, I mean, we
One or
start off
two.
with one or
as a pilot
two,
project.
see how those go, and
Exactly.
then go to the next step.
Yes, sir.
A couple things, these blue areas that you had on there, are they city property or private property?
So these are all subdivided tracts. These are all privately owned by hundreds of different owners. The Legends is city property.
Yeah,
There,
right.
that's the only one that's city property.
Okay, the other thing is, it sounds like we're building a small trailer park, to me. The way it's
First of all,
described.
we didn't say we are building anything.
Well, I mean, we're allowing something like small trailer parks, or additional, just trailer park with smaller properties, smaller homes on it, but it's still a trailer park. And 400 square feet, I was wondering if you requires, in a congregation of them, someplace where you do laundry and things, because hard enough to get a kitchen and someplace to sleep in the living room, let alone laundry and other things like that most people want. Thank you.
Again, just real quick, we can also require design standards, also other amenities. So again, it's definitely up in the air, and you have the control at this point.
Leave that map up. Christy Madigan. The lower right corner, I live right there at 99th and Redwood, so that's where I walk my dogs every day. I'd be willing to give it up for tiny homes. And it is, you can tell, there's lots, that area right there is all smaller lots. They're not the quarter-acre lots. And all the street signs are there, all the water is there. As a matter of fact, when I first moved here 6 years ago, I used to walk out there and there was constantly leaks out there. They finally have the water turned off out there. But, and tiny homes do have washer dryers in them. It's a single unit that is a washer and a dryer together. So I can understand having community areas in it to where they have, because you need outdoor space. Majority of people that live in these tiny homes use them only to sleep in. They are out doing other things. I believe the tiny home industry is going to be the future for millennials. They don't want a mortgage for 30 years. They want to see the country. And having this type of a park, if it's a park or wherever, they can have their home there and they rent the lot, they put it on, and then they up and move to Idaho or Florida or wherever they want to see the country, they want to explore the world. So they don't want to be tied into not only a mortgage for 30 years, but then they have their student loans on top of it. So a lot of them are looking for a smaller footprint on the world. And as you were saying, there's a lot of cities in California that haven't done this yet. And if we can get on top of it and get it right, we could have a lot of people that would want to have that advantage of being able to come here and have a place where they could put their tiny home for 6 months. We could have snowbirds coming here from Canada, because right now I was just in Hemet for a month. The snowbirds are there like crazy because they bring their fifth wheel, whatever, their tiny homes, and they park them in RV parks there. And if we had a better situation here, we could have a lot of snowbirds coming and giving us that annual income, so.
So you're talking about mobile tiny homes?
Mobile tiny homes.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're basically an RV, but
Yeah,
they're
no, I know,
built
I know,
out of,
I know.
they're built out of wood
We
instead
have
of
4
metal.
slabs out by Foxy's
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
have been there for I don't know how long. They've got
Yeah, that's,
electric and plumbing and
that's city
I've
property
never
as
seen
well.
anybody park that one yet.
Yeah, there used to be a few RVs out there years ago.
Yeah, but
Um,
I just think it's something for the future for the younger generation.
Just real
because-
quick, when you're talking about a snowbird, you're talking about somebody who owns an RV versus, I have some friends that are snowbirds.
Mhm.
But if you,
But some
hang on a
snowbirds have
second,
tiny homes.
my turn.
Okay.
The tiny homes on wheels have to abide by the RV laws and rules and regulations and have to be constructed as such.
Right.
However, we visited a tiny home construction facility in Fresno, and every time one of those is moved, they have to come out and tweak it. It's one of the guys said, they only move it like once, maybe 2 or 3 times in a lifetime. So, because it has to be tweaked, going down the
Yeah.
road, you're gonna lose some shingles, you're gonna lose some stuff in here, things are gonna twist as going down the road. The chassis are sturdy, but they're not Prevost type chassis where nothing moves inside.
Well, and there are a lot of people that have them that live in them and just drive around the country. I mean, they tow it with a pickup truck and.
No, that's an RV, not a tiny home.
No, tiny homes. I've seen them built and
I've
they
never
live in them
seen one
100%
I
around the
drive
country,
around a lot.
That's what.
like that.
I've never seen one of those, never.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen a lot of RVs
Uh-huh.
and trailers and stuff, but
I've
nothing
I've seen them
mobile
going
or
down
tiny
the road.
home.
but-
I believe you, you know,
Yeah.
if you say you've seen it. But I think the thing, we're not there yet, but we need to develop a community of tiny homes, not a tiny home on one lot, a tiny
Oh,
home on
I
another
agree.
lot, and
I
a
agree.
tiny home on another lot.
Right.
That will not work.
I agree
You
with
know,
that.
you've gotta say, okay, we're gonna set
They need to
aside,
be
and I
in
think the
areas
thing
like
is,
this where we can set them aside
Well,
I
and have.
think the thing is, it's gonna have to be probably on city land, kinda like Jade, whatever that up there. by-
Visit Jade.
I don't know about that.
Okay,
Well, no, I don't know about it either, but I'm just saying, unless you're gonna be able to get a whole bunch of, owners of different lots together to say, okay, we're gonna pool this and it's gonna be a 20-acre thing where we're gonna put 100 tiny homes or whatever. You know, how are you gonna do it?
Well, I think we've been on track where we wanna create an area for it, but, you know, the way you talk though, you're thinking that you're gonna have tiny homes and you're gonna people will start bringing their fifth wheels. And that won't happen, because the fifth wheels won't meet the criteria for a lot of these size homes, if you're designated
Yeah, but
tiny
I'm
home areas.
talking tiny
right?
homes. They will come
Yeah.
with tiny homes because there are people, basically gypsies, that drive around the country and live in their tiny homes. So there are people that will come with a tiny home
Right.
to stay in areas, because they search for them, because they are hard to find across the country.
And a lot of these are self-sufficient, just to add.
Oh,
So these areas over here where she said the water's turned off,
Okay.
if we allow it, we could allow them to be built with
But-
self-sufficient utilities.
But here, when we develop something, there'll still have to be something where that you'll have to have a developer that puts a shower area. I mean, you know, a communal, you know, with certain things, right, other than just their home.
No.
That's,
no.
No, they've got it in the home.
Yeah, there's showers.
Did
and
you
no-
go,
I mean-
did you go up to Fresno with us?
no, I didn't.
Sorry, you missed quite a show. They've got pretty lavish interiors. But
In 400 square
again,
feet.
let's open it up to the public.
Karen Macedonio, how does the city benefit? What is the benefit to the city? I'm hearing what my fellow resident said.
You know, where's,
How does the city benefit from somebody coming in for a couple of months and then leaving?
people
What's
spending their money.
commerce?
I mean,
What
they've
about
got it.
property tax?
I mean, pretty much, yeah. I'm sorry.
But if you had the tiny home that was stick-built on a pad, it would be taxed.
Okay, so that's the separation.
But you can't tax anything on wheels.
No, so the separation here is, are we gonna talk about something on wheels, or are we
We
gonna
have
talk about stick-built?
We have to. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, and I hope the rest of the commission agrees, that tiny homes need to be split into two different sides. One permanent, one on wheels.
Okay,
So we need to discuss it both ways.
so you would be looking at, the wheels would be closer to, and I'm just pulling words, closer to a mobile home park. And stick-built would be tiny homes on a lot with communal recreation
An
area.
overlay type thing. I would agree with you there.
Yes.
I hope the rest of us would.
Yeah, I think so. I think you have to, because you're gonna have two different kinds.
And then one suggestion would be, again, that planned unit development would give the city control so that you could designate not only the areas where they're built, but you could congregate those lots together so that you could make the common areas and make it a lot, better than trying to go individual lots. Because if you just say, oh, all these 50 lots could have tiny homes, people are gonna just do whatever they do. You wouldn't have much control.
Well, I don't want to spread them all out. I'm definitely for a planned area.
Seems like it was a good way to do it.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman Creighton, commissioners and staff. I'd like to defer most of my comments to the submission that you have received from our office. We provided some analysis to the Planning Commission and the Planning Department. The analysis and overall view is, what are the immediate needs in California City? What do the residential homeowners need today to come to California City? And so, as you have heard me testify many, many times, we have a problem. We have 47,000 empty lots that nobody wants. There are no utilities to most of them. Many of them do not have easements. We lack vision. We lack the ability to come together with the vision. We saw some progress in our workshop here a couple of months ago that was focusing on creating overlay areas for tiny homes and other discussion items that were positive. The idea presented to this Planning Commission and Planning Department is getting way off track into something other than using our properties and innovating our land use policy for tiny homes. Forcing the concept of tiny homes into only and exclusively planned unit development is a lack of vision. It will perish this town. There's a Bible verse, a man without vision will perish. Think of that. In all these decades, you tell me where the big movement is to come to California City and buy a home here. It doesn't exist. We're dinosaurs, man. Until we actually come up with a vision to start using our land innovative and appropriate to where the folks are today, folks do not want a mortgage. Many of them don't. Many of them don't qualify. Folks don't want to pay off big debt for education anymore. They don't want debt on their mortgage. Their grandparents have lost their house. California City has 47,000 empty lots. Many of them have no utilities. If we can get a vision that would allow these outlying areas that are in the extreme remote portions of the core where there may be some water lines, these folks could come in and build a high quality tiny home. Not the shanty stuff that you hear the fearmongers say, but actually quality design, superior homes, better than some of our homes. These homes are. And yet it's getting poo-pooed before we even start. These are not trailers. They have to have a building permit that meets the current standards, and if they're movable homes, they have to meet those standards. They're high-end standards. The idea of having the overlays is what we need. We are not in Long Beach. We don't really need ADUs. We need to find a way to attract people to use these residential lots, which, by the way, 16,000 of them are in tax default because our policies are archaic. We have no utilities to these properties. Off-the-grid solar is the way to go. We've talked with Fire Marshal. He says possibly we can get a rural calculation and provide water to these folks through a water tank if we're not able to turn those water lines back on. Let's be innovative. Let's have a vision for California City. None of these areas, I don't know, ma'am, if you live in tract 2528.
No, close to it.
Close to it, and so we don't want to encroach where the existing homes are. Not at all. We're talking about extreme rural areas that except for 2528, have nothing. Absolutely nothing. Miss Christie, you don't own that property that you walk your dog. It's private property.
Yeah.
They can still build a beautiful mansion if they can afford it. Or in the outlying areas, if we have an overlay, they can consider a very high-end, stick-built tiny home that meets our development standards that come through the Planning Commission. To have certain standards that will hold these people accountable to a high-quality tiny home. These are not shanty homes, not in our vision. There were some comments made about the benefits of PUD that eliminate flare-ups. Neighbors living that close to each other have been known to have problems. Well, that's why I don't want to do a PUD. That's the exact reason I don't want to do a PUD. I don't want to slam these people together. I'd like to take a lot in 2898 or 2812 and build a beautiful tiny home and attract people to an 80-foot wide lot and 120 feet deep. Plenty of space. In fact, they'll have more space than you do because you're crammed on one little lot with a bigger house. They'll have more open space in the outdoors. They can enjoy the views better than you can. They have to enjoy the views. They got to go out to the patio to enjoy the views. 99% of the properties in California City are less than 10 acres. So PUD is out the question. I mean, you can do that, but it's nothing. It's a blip on the screen, man. Overlay tracks is the whole ballgame. Joe Berrigan is 100% in support of this, as is the city manager has said she's in support of it. We want the overlay tracks. We don't need all of them. That's only a few of them. There's over 60 in the city. There's 47,000 lots that have nothing. I urge you to consider backing up a little bit and taking a look at the overlay areas and actually asking yourself if those would be appropriate. I brought all the track maps that will show you all the engineering is done, all the streets have been engineered, the streets are named, many of the water lines are already in. There's no use for these properties because they have no power. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
Colleen Gable, and I concur 100% with what he says. I want a tiny home on my lot. Let's incur that as an overlay area as well. I think, how are you gonna, if you do the group, do you plan on eminent domain and getting absentee property owners to take a cut in value for those properties? I mean, because those are all privately owned, little tiny lots. I don't know. I don't know what the plan is, but I concur 100% with the gentleman that just spoke.
Thank you. Commissioners.
When we went to Fresno to view the tiny homes, I talked to the guy that was head of the factory there, and he mentioned about having the factory in Cal City. It needed a place, and I think we should look into that. Then you could build them to our specifications.
Yeah, so, real quick, this PUD right here was actually proposed to build, the tiny home builder was gonna set up shop right here, or right next to it, and just crank them out and put them out there, so that could be definitely a possibility here, along with other methods.
That factory up there was just a one building. It's all they needed to build them.
Okay, well, I think what DJ had recommended would be exactly what we have right now with regular homes in Cal City. We've got one house, 100 yards of empty lot, one more house. You know, that, what is that accomplishing? If we build a community of tiny homes, I understand DJ's concern because he's saying there's a lot of, lots in the city that don't have power or don't whatever. But I don't see that that's going to accomplish anything. If you get 100 people to build 100 tiny homes on 100 lots that can't even see each other, all you have is the same thing we've already got. We've got developers who, we've got a house here, a house there. I live on a street where there's 16 houses, 8 on one side and 8 on the other. but there's also 16 empty lots on that same street. And what we need is to fill in, so that we start having neighborhoods where you can put sidewalks and curbs and gutters and, you know, paved streets. But that way, we're gonna be back to square one, exactly what we're doing over, just in tiny
And
homes.
there's really two issues. One of them is you have a very small home. The other issue is getting off the grid. And right now, you can't have your own well in town, right? So, and so I think to make DJ's concept a reality, it's less the footprint, the size of the house as it is changing some rules that we have right now, which is a whole other debate and a whole other, you know, issue about.
No, I think what DJ said about, you know, having a solar or maybe a tank, a 500-gallon water tank on your property, that makes sense. That way you don't have to bring in all the expensive utilities. But to have them scattered across the 203 square miles of Cal City, in my estimation, doesn't make sense. That doesn't make a community.
My name was brought up, so I'd like to respond. The fire marshal and the building official and I were in conference today. It's absolutely feasible to deliver water in a holding tank.
Yeah, no, I'm not having an issue with
100%
that.
feasible, so we don't have to contradict what was said. Additionally, it's not 203 square feet, just for reference, I apologize. It's just the overlay tracks. It's
But
not,
again, DJ, we're doing checkerboard stuff. We're not filling in a community.
I'll sit down here in a second, I just want to refer back to what you're saying.
So,
Those lots have no identifiable use, 0, period. We're not telling everyone else what to do with their lots. We want to attract conforming neighborhoods. I've said this to those that would listen to me, particularly Sean. Conforming neighborhoods is a huge opportunity for us. This is not that. This is simply providing a land use policy for those areas that are in the extreme remote areas of the city, so we can be a part of this phenomenon that people are identifying with across the country that don't want archaic land use for minimal lifestyles. This is their opportunity, and California City would capture those from LA that have income here to own a home here and own real estate. It's a dream for them.
Have you been out to Second City lately?
Not today.
No. I mean, basically, it's what you're talking about. One house here, another house a mile away, one half a mile away. They're, you know.
That's a
and
problem for you, it
that's-
sounds like. It sounds like that's not something you identify with.
I can identify with it, but is that what we want to do? Just perpetuate that in Cal City?
I offer you this. We have 47,000 empty lots. So it's going to be a lot at a time on those 47,000 lots.
You have 47,000 people that want to build tiny houses.
There are
Gentlemen,
47,000.
we're not gonna do it back and forth here all night long.
Empty
Okay,
lots.
you guys wanna take this
I'll sit down.
offline? I appreciate it.
Online?
Offline.
Oh, offline, okay.
Take it offline. First of all, that's North Loop, that's South Loop, just a semantics.
Oh, that's mine.
Anyway, do you have any comments?
no, not at this time.
All right. I don't have an issue with tiny homes. I don't have an issue with ADUs. My concern is where to put them. As a homeowner, I don't want a tiny home in a lot across the street bordered by 2 other homes. I don't want them used as infill. That's my personal opinion, and I'll stress it and stress it and stress it. I don't think that it helps property values at all if you're gonna do that. I am in favor of overlays. To force somebody to develop a whole community is probably not gonna happen, not in our lifetime, okay? Not in anybody's lifetime in this room. Cal City does not have a construction boom. It hasn't had one for years. I don't see one coming it's coming 2, 3 at a time, but people aren't pulling 100, 200 permits to build houses, whether they be 450 square feet or 3,500 square feet. It's just not happening. we don't have the industry, and until we have the industry, we're not attracting people. Yes, you should have houses to attract the people, but they'll all go up at pretty much the same time. So my personal opinion is that we do overlays, but not the entire city. Pick one, work with it, and go from there. That's my personal opinion, and we can go from there. We're kicking this can down the road way too much. The state does not dictate whether or not we have tiny homes. I think maybe we need to probably amend the ordinance to allow them, but only in an overlay area, in my opinion. But if we're gonna do this, we need to have a proposed change in the ordinance. And tiny homes on wheels, I don't know. I have driven my RV over many states, and I have never seen a tiny home on wheels on the road. And I've been RVing since 1998. So, what's your pleasure, gentlemen?
I think I'm behind Jim on this. One with the overlays, and I think we need to do some things to stop kicking it down the road. This discussion has come up several times and we're still beating it around. We need to get a day where we put it on agenda and we start working on pushing some of this through in the overlays. I'm not for the infills.
So you have sorry, just to interject real quick. Do you have one of these tracks in mind for that overlay?
Well, which one has the most utility? 25, 28?
Yes.
Go for it.
28, 12, 2.
Okay, 28, 12, 20, pick one, I don't care.
Yes.
But here's, if I may speak for the commission, this is the direction I'd like to see it go, and I hope you all concur. Start changing the verbiage in the ordinance for secondary homes. Amend it to ADUs and include tiny homes. We need to come up with a square footage for each. I know there's no min or max on ADUs, but we can dictate on tiny homes. I'm sure of that. So, and then we'll work at changing the ordinance, and we'll see if we can get it past council.
Do you want to worry about the track now? Do you want to put that in the ordinance that it's only allowed in?
We will probably need to identify one of those two tracks as the overlay track.
Because the one you just picked out, how many would be able to fit in? How many units would we be looking at in that area?
A lot.
How
A
many?
real lot. A whole lot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I guess there's
It's a lot of area.
Yeah, that's actually
It's-
legends.
You wanna say maybe there's gonna be 75 or better units that could go in there?
Oh, more than that.
More than that?
Yeah.
So I mean, that would be a nice project. I mean, to see,
Yeah, and that's, part of the thing that we're trying to accomplish here is to reactivate some of these dead tracks that have the infrastructure but don't have any movement because, for whatever reason, they just haven't built a house there. So this might be a reason that the homeowner, the property owner decides to finally build or sell or, have increase in property values similar to the M1
we're back to
districts.
would we need,
the random concept, where there are no.
Not if it's in an overlay. We limit them in that area. So
Okay.
maybe eventually they'll all infill themselves.
But what about the amenities of people living in a tiny unit?
Well,
Many don't want it.
I mean,
they're supposed to be self-sufficient.
they are self-contained. They have refrigerator, they have hot and cold running water, they have a bathroom, shower, sleeping facilities, storage facilities. They're very ingenious in how they come up with storage for these things.
Understood.
But right now, on my street, fortunately, I got a basketball hoop in there, but if I wanted to play basketball, I'd have to go somewhere else. So they have to go somewhere else too. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and dictate that the city come up with a community center for them. I'm not gonna dictate it. We can't afford it. And I don't think a developer wants to build it.
It's your city.
I know it's my city. It's yours, well, it's not yours, you don't live there.
Your wallet.
But DJ, please, you don't need to stand up. I mean,
We're just gonna respond to the question on the lots.
it's a whole crap load of lots.
There are
is what
six
it-
hundred approximate lots in 2528, a couple hundred of them are now light industrial. So residential would be approximately 400. And 2812 is approximately 400 to 500 lots, could be 600 lots. Tracks map are here, Ron, I can show you afterwards.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is half of it, it's basically another half here that's, this is actually mixed, or not mixed, but, multifamily lots here, and then
It's all
there's
right.
single family.
And with the commercial zone and everything, I mean, you could have somebody actually service that area.
Right.
To some extent, you'd see a little, maybe possibly the communities, you know, store pop up, because with all the business going around, I can see somebody trying to move out there anyway.
So any thoughts about owner occupancy? Doesn't matter. What about the overcrowding?
Will there be overcrowding if you leave it in an overlay tract? Seriously, will there be overcrowding if you're building one per parcel?
I mean, there's a
One per
lot
lot.
of issues with tiny homes, and this is just a few.
No. We need to get started somewhere.
We've got
Commission?
all this land in town.
I mean,
I'm still not clear as to who we're doing this for. I mean, there's out-of-town people that are gonna come here to live in a tiny home. There's the current people that. are-
tiny home with a pad with the utility hookups.
Let me speak frankly. All we're doing is setting up an overlay tract. Who's really gonna come? I don't think it'll grow. I personally don't think it'll grow, but we need to at least provide the opportunity for it. And if somebody wanted to buy up all that property and make a development, great. But I don't think that's gonna happen either. But the opportunity's there. So we're creating an opportunity for somebody to come out here and build something. Maybe you see one, you see another.
Let us ask this then. That zoning right now is, I believe, oops,
One more that way, actually. We've had it.
R1, okay. So, single-family home, not sure what the typical lot sizes are, but why not, instead of doing an overlay for tiny homes, why not just change that to tiny home zone? And you would have a minimum lot size. And the reason I say that is because it's still R1. So the overlay says, yes, you can put a tiny home, but also you're still permitted to put a conventional 1,200 square foot home. So now you're mixing these two different concepts. So rather than making an overlay, why not just make it a R47 zone, which would be minimum or maximum,
Designated
600
tiny
feet.
home
right, because
development,
otherwise you're gonna get incompatibility going on.
in case somebody tries to squeeze their normal home size
Exactly,
in there.
right. So you might as well make it, if you want tiny homes, say it, and just make that the zone district.
New information, commissioners, you got any questions?
I can see his point here.
I think we need to table this, and put it on the agenda for some.
Look, a lot,
I mean, it's just.
we've been kicking this can down the road. We need to say, do something or not do something.
I'd say we should do something, that this is what everybody's consensus, that this is the future.
Designate the area specifically for tiny homes. And like you said, I don't know what it takes to change, like from R1 to the R47 or whatever you kind of designate. I don't know what that
Literally,
designation
have to
is.
create a
but
new R designation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
so,
it's no more difficult than creating a new overlay designation, same amount of work.
I think the thing is, I think Jim said something about it, but that even if we designate the overlay R47 or whatever, who's gonna come and build on those, put tiny homes on those lots? DJ, are you gonna build 30 tiny homes and then recruit people to come and buy them?
but it's an
What
opportunity.
Matt's point is, if you don't put the overlay in and you leave it as an R1 to allow tiny homes, you can still have R1 single-family units.
So you'll have mixed communities.
Which is
So-
not good.
So how do we do this in the ordinance and say, only in this R1 area is tiny homes allowed?
for your information, there are existing R1 houses right here. There's about 3.
There's a couple south of that too.
Yes, there are.
So you'd have to grandfather those in.
Okay, so now we need to ask council if they're gonna approve, let us have tiny homes in the city, in only this area. So we need to change the ordinance, so please draft up a change to the ordinance. We'll talk about it and we'll vote on it.
Wait, one thing now that you mentioned is some in that area, I'm sorry. In that area, if you already have homes there, I wanna look where there's a clean slate. Cause if you do it now and you just jam these people that have homes there now, and you all of a sudden you zone around them or
You're gonna break that in half.
you know, it's,
They'd be grandfathered in, I don't think that.
yeah, but grandfathered in or not. These people would, up there up on the hill, that have the $1 million homes, would you put an area there and circle them? And then say, well, you're fine, but we're gonna allow all these homes. You just took that $1 million home, whatever the value is, and you just crushed it.
We would notice them, so they would get a notice
I'm
in the mail.
I'm more for looking a space that hasn't been touched. I don't think we can try to, for myself, to squeeze some people now. And just because they're grandfathered, I wouldn't like it. I don't think anybody would like that thrust on it. We have room, we have spots, and we may need a little time to look at some of the plans here. But where we don't have to affect anybody now. We won't have to worry about trying to get somebody to grandfather in. I mean, if you have your home, I don't think we have to affect anybody with trying to experiment someplace where we wanna try to develop.
So-
It's good that we start, but I don't wanna go and push it on somebody's neighborhood.
So this is
Three
the,
homes is a neighborhood?
Well, you're just saying, you just talked about, you wouldn't want it next door. It'd be the same thing. Okay, you're grandfathered in, or your grandfather. All of a sudden, you're getting 16 homes around yours and, oh yeah, so what? It's grandfathered.
What?
Now I can't sell my home. Regardless if you're grandfathered in, you just blew whatever value of my house right out the door. Because when they appraise your home to go sell it, they value the houses around your neighborhood. Even if your house is 150, that little tow trailer that people have, they're only 60,000. I think we can find a better spot. I know that's a great location, but I didn't realize that there was already homes in that area.
Hold it there. Not you there,
But
I have a question.
that's all I'm gonna say on that.
25, 28, 28, 12. Which one has absolutely nothing built in it?
2812.
Do that one.
Do it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Do 28, 12, okay? See how it works. You've got utilities in the area. Come up with an ordinance change to allow tiny homes in that particular tract of R1.
I want to suggest something, that we have a special commission meeting, that the 4 of us, or 5 of us, go to that parcel of land and physically view it and see how, the easiest access road, or, I know it's a pain in the butt, it shouldn't take more than an hour.
15
and
minutes.
We could do it during the week at some point, and have a kind of a hands-on feeling of what we're talking about. Right now, we're looking at a square on a map. That's it.
Can we do that without violating the Brown Act?
Yes, I think if we call a special meeting, but I don't know.
Call a special meeting, the public has to be invited.
Well, we'll
And it has-
invite them,
And it has to be put out, it has to be announced.
so we can do all that.
you can all visit the site.
Doesn't mean we're gonna go
individually as well.
tomorrow.
What?
You could all just check out the site individually and it wouldn't be.
We could all do it individually,
Right.
not put together, but just,
Yeah, well-
we put it on the agenda that
Yeah.
before the next meeting, each person
So
took.
that's what,
Time to
Mendon,
go
to
out there.
Lindbergh?
I can,
It's
you let me
Mendon,
know.
to Lindbergh,
Yeah, I
east
can
of
keep you out
Nerelia?
there. Correct.
You could drive the coach.
Right.
and we can go in one at a time.
I took Anna, Joe, and Sean to each of these tracks about a week ago.
Yeah, so this is.
Yeah, but I didn't.
I can take you as well to each of them.
Okay, I mean, I don't know if the rest of the guys up here have been out there to see it, I have no idea, I mean, I know where Mendenboro is, sure, but I don't know, can I access that?
Yes, I'll take you, but you can access it.
I just think it might be an important thing to do so that we can actually have a hands-on experience. This is the piece of land we're talking about that we're gonna designate for a tiny home overlay and go from there.
At the risk of prolonging this, my opinion would be 25, 28 might be better for attracting people to build, considering this is a hotbed for cannabis development. There has been a few over here, not nearly as many.
What's the
as up
distance
here.
between 25 and 28? How far are they
That's 1
separated?
mile.
That's a mile right here.
Yeah.
So, right.
And the idea, like Jim brought up, or why he said, let's go to that one, because there's no properties, there's
Yeah.
nobody built on there.
Right.
The other one has some residential already.
Yeah, I understand that. So, one, they would be noticed for this, so they could come and give their 2 cents. Obviously, that would be taken into account. The other would be, since potentially all the cannabis seasonal workers would have a place to stay.
They
kind
can
of-
travel.
It's only a mile.
Let me suggest this.
They can travel a mile.
Let me suggest this. Keep 2812 in the back of your mind. Go to the three folks, 2528. Ask them if they have any objection to the R1 designation there be rewritten to allow tiny homes. If they have objection, then we focus on 2812. If they don't, I agree 2528 is probably more ideal, but let's keep both in mind, but ask the folks that live there. Can we put this to bed now?
Sean is thinking like a planner, and he says 2812 is automobile dependent, whereas 2528 is more walkable.
To what?
But
Cannabis,
there's nothing in either place since you're gonna walk to Foxy's.
There's cannabis all over the western side of Neuralia. There's cannabis all down Neuralia Road.
which is where they would work, where they would live in the tiny home and walk to work.
2812 is just as relevant as 2528.
Anyway, can we put this to bed now? Are we done with this subject?
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to discussion item 2. ORA amendment to cannabis. Consideration of amending the cannabis ordinance regarding the setback for cannabis use from the ORA zone district. Staff.
Yes. It's been brought to our attention that as you know, currently in the city's municipal code, section 29, there is a requirement that there be a minimum 2,200 foot setback for any cannabis use to any residential. I don't think anybody quibbles about the fact that R1, R2, the typical R districts want to keep that buffer. But it has been brought up that since so much of the town is ORA, which has been considered a holding zone, it's minimum 1 acre lot size. We might want to modify that to make it something less than 200 feet distance. It came up earlier tonight, you had a hands-on situation where if you were to approve something where you made it 10 feet or a 20-foot buffer, then you could have the cannabis uses much closer than the minimum setback. So it's been brought to our attention by some of the people in the cannabis business that this may be a hard standard to meet, to maintain that minimum setback.
What's the minimum standard now? 200.
200 for any residential district, and ORA is a residential district.
So why do they say it's gonna be a hardship on them?
Because,
If you turn to this map, it didn't make it to the slideshow, I apologize, but this is it came in your packets, so I'll come up here and show you. So this really shows kind of the reasoning behind this. This lot right here is actually.
Was it in the package, Sean?
Yes. It's right after the tiny home discussion item. So this lot is for sale right here, and 2/3 of it is ate up by this buffer. So they would have to build all through here. You know, just on that 1/3, it basically makes 2/3 of this lot useless, unless this is rezoned right here, the way it is. And another good example of this is where we're going to discuss squaring off the zoning. The map. No, but just for this, this map will show that, you know, these small parcels are very affected by this 200-foot buffer. It eats up a lot of parcels, so that's why this is brought
They just
before
need
you.
to buy more land. What the heck?
Or rezone
No,
it around it.
Commissioners, any questions?
The way I was looking at it, my thought on that was if we could give some concessions there if them ORA areas were empty. As long as that, and then when it comes in, since it's not been designated, and then it's, you know, people move in, then they know what they're moving into if they decide to move closer. But on the OR part, as long as that lot, but if it has buildings, facilities, then no, you don't wanna give it. But if that's vacant OR land, I can see where we could give some concessions here.
How much concession do they want?
You still have property,
No, I
what
mean,
is it,
from
30?
200 to what? To 10?
20 or 40. 20 or 40 is what's recommended.
How much?
But consider that you have to have a fire department setback anyway.
But only 20 to 40 feet
25
setback?
25 feet is their setback, so that,
200,
you gotta need a fire lane all the way around your property.
right.
So that's 25 feet all the way around, so that's 25 feet is already there.
From
So-
ORA, not not R1 or through R5.
This is only for abutting ORA property.
Okay, and what do we get in return for giving them that concession?
More development.
No,
more
that
cannabis
doesn't
development.
work. What are we gonna get back as far as the city? Are they gonna give us, are they gonna put beautiful walls around? Are they gonna make sure that they're all planted, that the utilities are all underground? Are they gonna give us anything, or they just want? Because that's what happens to Cal City. We give them this, we give them that, and then they, like a teal out there, looks like shit. You drive down there and you think you're going past the prison. They're not doing anything extra, they haven't done any kind of deceleration lane or acceleration lane. They're gonna do the smallest amount that they can get away with. And if we give them this concession, we gotta make sure that we get something back in turn.
For the record, they will redo that intersection. They just haven't done it yet.
What the city gets back is usually done at the development plans review.
Correct. In that site plan approval, we did condition that they would put landscaping.
It has to be in place, right? Otherwise.
It's a contingent, it's a condition of
Right,
construction.
contingent on this or that, but I mean, we gotta have it in writing, so when they do it.
At the site plan review, it does have in writing.
Okay,
That's when it goes in writing. And they have to abide by it.
exactly.
Cause what, they're getting jammed up even though they got 8,000 acres on one side, they've gotta get so far away from the county line. And that's why I'm saying I think we could give that 25 for Delane on areas that are opened and hasn't been designated yet.
Because you notice every time we do any of these zone changes in parcels, they don't wanna they don't wanna have to pave the road. They want the city to pave, they don't wanna incur the cost, they don't wanna do this, they want the city to do this, and then we get folks who are pro-cannabis, who say, yeah, if we're gonna attract cannabis, we have to give them more of this and give them more of that. And we're just giving away everything
This is not
before
giving
they
them
do
any.
anything.
This is a buffer zone. This is not giving anything one way or the other.
Well, it is if you're giving away 200 setback and making it just 20 to 40 feet setback, you're giving them all that land. that
It's
they can
something we
develop.
haven't even designated yet.
No, we haven't, but that's the proposal.
We are not in a position to ask for anything as a planning commission. We are not. The city, when they do their site plan review, the city asks for givebacks from the developer. What we're doing is allowing, if we reduce the setback, from my understanding, we reduce the setback from 200 to, say, 40 feet, we are allowing them to construct closer to the lot line as it abuts to RA. If it abuts to R1 or anything else, it has to be the minimum required setback.
But if our recommendation is that they, in turn, do this and it gets presented to the council, that is what that's the only thing that we can do.
No, the only thing we can do is either approve the reduction of setback or not.
We can't recommend that, if we approve the setback, that in turn they would do this and that and then present that to the city
The
council.
council can't even ask for that.
Oh, okay.
Only the city, when they sit down in the site plan review, that's the only people that can ask for conditions
Okay.
or dictate conditions of approval. And that's planning department, the building department, and fire department, I don't know who else is in there.
And those are public meetings, so.
Yeah, they are public
Anyway.
meetings, and the public is welcome to come in and voice your opinion. Karen, you've been to many of them, right?
Yes.
No, not yet. I'm gonna open it up in just a minute.
I'll hold it till
Thank
you
you.
open it.
All right, okay, go ahead, Karen. I'll open up to public.
Public, Karen Macedonia.
Karen, pull the microphone down.
Because I sat through all the meetings with the city council as we were approving bringing cannabis in, I'm having personally a real tough time with this discussion. Because I remember all the conversations, what's the setback gonna be? What's the setback gonna be? Is it gonna be 50 feet? Is it gonna be 100 feet? And this really, at 200 feet, was what our residents were happy with. So I'm really questioning whether this flies in the face of what the citizens have already said, that you're even considering this. So that's just my 2 cents worth. And as far as the conditions, if it's only the city that can ask for the conditions, then we have to remember that the citizens still talk to the city and this is what we want. So our citizens need to be involved in this conversation.
You realize that this is strictly abutting ORA, not R1, 2, or anything else.
But I remember the conversations, and though you're sitting in the same meetings I did, those conversations were heated and passionate, and they negotiated to get to the point where it was a 200-foot setback, because we tried smaller things, and the residents wouldn't have anything to do with it. And we can go back and we can look at the recordings, but it was really, really plain what the citizens wanted.
You guys are probably seeing me, Colleen Gable. This would directly negatively impact me because I am ORA. There are a lot of people in that area that this would be impacted by, so I beseech you to keep the 200-foot setback, please.
And we just wanted to say that this was brought to us. We didn't initiate this.
I understand.
Good evening again, DJ Tudig. So I appreciate the comments made by the public. I know in the staff report, and I think in discussing this with the staff, there is some awareness that this is a reasonable consideration, a reasonable amendment. I'll speak to some of the banter. With respect to those properties immediately west of the high school, I was not excited about a zone change. That's the area north of Karen. There are homes there. That zone change is immediately encroaching a residential area. Correct? That's a problem. I'm concerned about odor to the high school. The subject matter here is an ORA amendment with respect to setbacks. For months and years, I've been asked to talk about the setback as being excessive. I've refused to even discuss it because I'm a part of the idea that we need to separate cannabis from the residential areas. 100% congruent with that. Here's the problem. Some of our light industrial areas that have power and water are in areas that are ORA, distant from the houses. So there are those areas that are ORA that are distant and removed from residences that are greatly impacted because they are immediately abutting the zone change for light industrial. Where we have power and where we have water, that's the crux. By slamming light industrial right next to the residential existing homes created this crux. I was not in favor of that. But however, at Lincoln and Neuralia, there is ORA. And throughout the city, there's 80,000 acres of open space that nobody cares about. That'll never, ever get built. You stood there and you looked northeast for what, 150 miles? And there's nothing. And likely will never be anything unless we attract land use. Developers are interested, purchase offers are pending. They're not going to build on those subject properties if there's not some reasonable land use plan that says that all of that ORA, where there's no homes, by the way, there are no residences, that the setback can either be eliminated where it's unnecessary. Maybe that's 15, 20, 30 feet. I think the fire department wants 26 feet, 26, 30 feet. It's a very reasonable request other than those areas that have existing residences. If we can figure out a way to carve them out of this, I'm in favor of that. Where the existing residences are, I'm in favor of that. If you really dive down to what open space means and controlled development, it means it comes back to planning, it comes back to council for a development plan. No one's been doing that in ORA. Likely no one will ever do that in ORA. So it's not going to have an impact. By eliminating the setback or reducing it to 20 feet, it's not going to have an impact other than those few residences, which I'm in agreement. I support that 100%. So, other than those few residences, throughout the light industrial area where it's immediately abutting wide open space, there's no need to have a setback.
So why can't we do the overlays individually? Address them individually, and where there's residents, have the bigger setback, and where there is nothing there, then say, okay, you know.
If your span of view, 360-degree view, there's nothing, I would suggest you don't need the setback. If you're seeing several homes or any homes that would be upset by that, I'm on board with that. I agree with you. And I'm not saying that this other fellow's project isn't viable. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's not the prime area for cannabis developments. The areas that are prime, the areas that have power, that have water, that are not encroaching the residential area, those are the areas that I think it's entirely reasonable, where there's power and water, and the open space is there, the controlled development is there, they're unoccupied, they're not really residential. You can build a home there. You could, but it's controlled development. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
We believe Mr. Hogan's comment is very practical and one we could write in, where if there's an existing residence, then 200 remains intact.
Actually did some homework on this.
Yeah. Commissioners, how do you wanna go, what do you wanna do on this? I have an idea, but,
Right, go ahead, spit it out.
well, comment I have is 200 feet. It does seem excessive when you consider that the likelihood of anything being built in much of the ORA land nearby is very low. Other than maybe other maybe a cannabis business, which would require rezoning anyway. So if you will, consider rewording section 9-2.2903, paragraph 1, to include verbiage to something to the effect of, unless abutted by vacant ORA property where the setback may be reduced to 40 feet. But you could add in Mr. Hogan's comment about any visible homes or any homes visible, you can forget it, something along those lines. I mean, I can see there's some seriously odd shaped properties in Cal City. We've seen that in some of the rezoning that we've done. And if you look at the 200 foot setback lines on some of those, you've got acres and acres of property that can't be developed. So, and there's nothing, we're talking way out on 20 Mule Road in this particular one. I'm referring to DJ's property that we recently rezoned. It's so odd shaped that if you took a 200 foot setback on that, you would really limit what could go in there. And it's ORA so far out, you can't, I mean, you can see for miles, you know. So that would, in my opinion, I agree with Commissioner Hogan on that, you know, if you can't see it, then allow it. If you can see one, don't allow it. I don't know if anybody else has any differing opinions or concurring opinions, but go ahead and shout it out.
I'm not sure if we can't see it, but
How about it?
maybe a half mile type thing or a mile, you know, here you can see 20 miles. You know, I don't think we want to just, because we can see something 20 miles out there up on a hill that we want to stop that. But I mean, it's going to be some kind of common sense here. You know, if we're within, you know, a specific number, quarter mile or half mile within a property on the open RA that, you know, that will allow within a certain range. But like
Church
I said,
is 1,000 feet, by the way.
you know, well,
Churches and school, yeah, we made that to 1,000 feet.
yeah, I still want to go farther than 1,000 feet, but not to the extent where, you know, it's 20 miles out. To give them that.
You know, in addition to that, every effort should be made by a developer to avoid placing any cannabis structures so close to the property line. They really should think it through. Ancillary or accessory buildings, they should be allowed as close as possible. I mean, well within the 200 foot structure, 200 foot setback if there is one. I mean, as long as it's not being used to store or grow or manufacture or process cannabis, I mean, just, I don't know, oxygen tanks or welding tanks or something along those lines. I mean, what's the harm in that? But in any case, all construction, specifically cannabis-related construction, has got to be reviewed by the Planning Commission, Building Department, and the other reviewing agencies. So, you know, they're going to have to come up with a site plan, show where their buildings are located, how close they'll be to the buildings, and you can nix them right there. You know, and knowing that, or when they come in, if we have to do a rezoning for them, we can tell them, okay, this side, and this side are okay for a minimal setback, but this side is not. And we can dictate that, but let's see about getting that through council. I agree with Karen, there's some council members up there that are not gonna like this.
ORC block.
I can see it, I can understand it, and I can understand the property owners not wanting it. I mean, in some cases, that to them 200 feet is not enough. But, I mean, that's what the city council agreed to, was 200 foot. But I can see where the likelihood of being constructed nearby, any residence being constructed nearby is minimal. I mean, probably not for the next 10 or 15 years. And I, you know, as a property owner, if I had R1 next to something just been rezoned to M1, I think I start looking at selling. Or rezoning it myself for sale. But that would be me, but anyway, what are we gonna direct them to
Jim,
do?
may I get a second call on this?
Keep it with,
We spoke, so yeah.
Yeah, so this will be real brief. So we did a lot of analysis on the original land use policy, and I can promise you that when we had the conversation about residential areas, we were in support of a setback. HDL, the city's contractor, didn't have a lot of data to support particular easements. And so the one gentleman that was here, he said his own finding was 155 feet nearest schools, churches, residences, etc., that there might be some odor. But over the past couple of years since Prop 64, with respect to the setbacks on undeveloped area, 200 feet is absolutely excessive. So there was a lot of discussion on the setbacks, Karen is correct, but that discussion didn't drill down to the controlled development and the open space. That's the clearest distinction tonight. We're only speaking about that open space, that controlled development where there isn't anything, in my view, not those that are nearest existing residences. Completely separate argument in my point of view. Thank you.
Anybody else from the public want a second bite?
Keith Middleton, seems to me that 200 feet would make sense if there was a house across the street, but not a house a quarter mile away. You know, it has to be within 200 feet in residential. Why does it have to be a quarter mile or half mile or 100 miles away? That doesn't make sense. So I can see, requiring 200 feet if you have a house pre-existing across the street, but not out in the building.
Thank you. Anybody else? Commissioners, any final comments? I do have one question though. How? Go ahead, Christy.
Christy Martin. My question, I just questioned DJ on this. If we reduce the setback to 40 feet, so that's giving them 160 feet to develop. And if you're a quarter of an acre wide, how much more tax revenue would the city receive for the extra building grown there?
I have no idea.
But that's
Yeah, it's
a
potential-
consideration to
Potential
have.
tax revenue.
It's definitely a lot of potential tax revenue for, especially in, like you said, the ORA area where there's nothing out there. I can totally understand having the 200 feet if there are residents close by. But a half mile away, I don't think they need 200 square feet. 200 foot setback. Thank you.
The question I have for you guys is, who would make the determination? I assume it would be a case by case as it comes to site plan review as to what setback you're going to allow. Would you guys make that determination?
Yeah, we could do, if it is like a half mile, we could take an existing building in ORA and do a half mile buffer around that and say you need property within this.
Okay. So, do you want, what's the pleasure? Do you want them to come up with a draft on the?
I think we need to.
Okay.
Well, for us to have.
this will be something that have to be set through the,
We're gonna have to have a
Council,
public
right?
hearing on this, so they're gonna have to come up with a draft,
it'll have to go through the council, won't it?
after we get through with it. After we get through with it. So we're gonna need to do a public hearing, and, that's probably gonna bring some folks in that have never been here before. But, yeah, we'll set it up for a public hearing with, new wording to amend, 2903.
On OR property, adjacent to OR property,
All right,
exclusively, yes.
almost the last and final item.
Do you have a preferred number?
What do you mean?
20, isn't
Instead of 200?
I thought we said we're doing it 40, 30 to 40 feet, somewhere there. The fire department requires 25 to 26 feet. So if you give them an extra 10 or 15 feet, whatever.
Put it at the 40.
I don't really care. I don't really care, but I don't want to give, you know, like Richard said, we don't want to give away the farm.
And we have, in site plan review, run into this. And in some cases, it's worked out pretty well, because if you've had 100-foot street right of way, that kills 100 feet. And then sometimes they'll put a sump and parking.
Yeah.
You can have those items before you have your first building. So they've been able to work it out.
Yeah, but some of the tighter lots or
Right.
tighter parcels may not be appropriate. All right, ready for discussion item 3?
Yes.
Go for it.
So, so this is the last item for tonight, since we already covered 4. This is just to square off a couple areas in the city for zoning. Sorry, I don't think I put in a full map, but I'll point out where these are after I describe the squaring off of the area. This is actually the tract that we're looking towards potential tiny home overlay. This area was rezoned, I believe, last year, and 2 years ago. So it's a little less of an issue here, especially if that ORA buffer goes away. This property is one that's potentially could become a cannabis development that they can't develop because of the ORA zone right here. So this one is more of a predicament at this point. Having said that, actually, we have yesterday had interest on this parcel to be rezoned for a potential cannabis development or a potential rezone. But anyway, this is the zone changes that occurred earlier this year. I believe this is a total of 4 or 5 that were done, and this area definitely should be considered to square off. This is kind of on the verge of spot zoning. However, we did do the zone changes. One large zone change right here, so that's kind of what brought forth this strange zone. There's another one. So the first one that I pointed out is actually up here. This is an old zoning map, so it hasn't been updated. But this is where that zone is, and then this is the kind of the checkerboard. So again, the one on the left is right here, and the one on the right is right here. And again, so this is basically a discussion to get initiate this another city initiated zone change, possibly 2, in order to just shore up these areas to be more congruent in one zones.
Commissioners, you got anything? All right, my comments are this. At some point, we need to stop expanding. At some point, and you know, several cities have designated areas. Period. That's it. That's the only place you're gonna have it. We haven't done that. We've got several areas that are M1, M2, and we just created a couple more on 20 Mule Team. I think it's time, personally, that we set our limits, hard limits, that this is where cannabis is going to be grown, period. We're not going to allow it anywhere else at this point in time until the areas are saturated. I can agree with the squaring off. I don't know about anybody else, but what street is this? Is that Karen?
Correct.
Why are you suggesting this?
It would just, this is just purely that suggestion. We could cut it off right here. This is commercial, so, and this is a main thoroughfare, so it kind of only made sense to include that.
What is that zone? Is that a C,
That's all ORA currently.
oh,
Every-
but you said
everything-
it was commercial.
The red is commercial.
Oh,
That
gotcha.
is C2.
Gotcha.
Here's the legend. And this, all the white is ORA.
Thanks for that.
Because it would leave a little spot of OR right
Correct,
there.
and this is valuable frontage, so
But you got ORA all right here. Oh, that's ORA. So what's out, what's
Why
that, what's that
little
difference?
finger, why that little finger is part of the figure eight picture. Okay.
and it's on, yeah, in Aurelia, it's more valuable frontage, so truck traffic, it's a truck route.
But what, you wanna square this off, right?
Right, so
So that isn't a square or rectangle to me. What is that piece hanging down for? What is that, the appendix?
if you wanna get into semantics, you rectangle it off.
Okay,
But this allows again for that, a little buffer between the rest as well. Pending the
But when you
previous item.
when you think
Okay.
about it, this commission really did some spot zoning. That's the long and the short of it.
look at everything's technically, well, everything's technically contiguous if you go above. If you take the road out of it, everything's contiguous. But I would suggest making that commercial. And then go ahead and make that M1, then you got a square. Or rectangle,
That would
whatever you
allow
call it. And then
a buffer.
for that one, for the one on the left, so what's it gonna cost the city?
So, real quick, again, we have interest in this parcel here, and then this parcel here. The water line is planned, it ends right here, right now it's capped, it's planned to tee off, and come along here, which would give these properties infrastructure, so these areas really don't have access yet, so these may be a little more of a priority.
That no one, I can't see doing that until this happens.
Right.
Would you agree? I mean, that one that Sean pointed out, they're talking about applying for zoning. Given the givens, unless this happens, I don't see why the city should encourage this
I think it's in a floodplain too.
on top of everything else.
I agree.
It's definitely a low area.
They would have to
To the
go,
right.
they would have to go through Fish and Wildlife, no matter what, for snow abatement.
Yeah, it's a mess.
You can see the little
Yeah, I see it. I see it on the
drainage
commercial.
here.
Check the aerial map.
Commissioners, actually, public, any comments on this?
Yeah. The far one, again, that impacts me. Also, oh, sorry, Colleen Gabler. Also, I have a lot of equestrian friends that we ride through there, and the commission has already spot zoned ORA. And then if you're on top of that, willing to get rid of that 200-foot setback, all of these people have horses and livestock, and they're not here tonight because they're not aware of this. They probably didn't get noticed. I was just really lucky that I did. This impacts all of us, and keep it north of Mendenboro, guys. You already spot zoned some of it that's ORA. There's a lot of people that have horses that would like to move out here. There's not a lot of places until we can get water. Some people are still hauling their own water to water their livestock on a daily basis. People are holding on to those pieces of property for equestrian estates.
You realize that we're not making a decision tonight.
Okay, that's great, but here's the thing. I hope all of those people that would be impacted, even if they're further than 200 feet, get notices.
They'll get a 300-foot notice wherever the zone changes.
Okay, so those
proposed at
lots
that
are
time.
330 feet, so they wouldn't get a notice.
All these will, so if you
Those on
move-
Poppy wouldn't get a notice because those are 330 foot lots. So that's further than 300 feet, so they're not gonna get a notice. I just got really lucky.
when this comes up, everybody within 300 feet of this per state law will get a notice.
Okay, and I'm saying, all of those people that live on Poppy that have equestrians that it impacts won't get a notice because they're further than 300 feet away. You guys, I encourage you to drive around out there, please. If you're by my place, stop by. I'll give you a soda pop. What's your pleasure, Pepsi or Sprite? I got it.
Beer.
Well, come by and visit.
Evening, Commissioners. I'll speak briefly on this. approach to the map. One of the conversations that Mr. Alexander and I had when we started.
DJ, why don't you take the mic with you, if you don't mind?
I remember talking with Matt about our applications here. I represented this 40-acre zone change a couple of years ago. And over the counter, Matt and I spoke about the possibility of squaring this off. And Matt looked at me with a sparkle in his eye and said, I really think we ought to square that whole portion off, don't you think? And so we kind of hit it off because that's effective land planning. And over the years, I've listened carefully to the idea that, all this stuff's coming forward. Some of this doesn't have utilities. Some of this is immediately west of the high school where the school children are, and other applications that maybe aren't really what is, for some, the best area for cannabis. And having said that, I've often thought that the areas that we had in the heart of cannabis, where the power is, where the water is where we should have our focus areas. I believed at the time that Matt said that he was really appropriate and accurate. This should probably be squared off. In all fairness, I do represent these property owners, and it does have a tremendous impact on them, those setbacks. And so if this were included or squared off, those properties become usable. I think the proponent told you it's not usable land otherwise. And so it really makes sense. What also makes sense is in those areas, if you look out 100 miles here, there's nothing, is of course the other subject matter was eliminate the setback. There's no homes in this entire tract. So you're not going to see anything here when you look out, which makes that reduction of the setback make sense. But however, if you're going to do any of this, I would suggest you mail all the way to Poppy. I brought that testimony before. I don't think 300 feet is fair. I think it should be 1,000 feet. That's my own opinion. And I've often said that here. I think at one time council directed staff to do a greater mailing, but it fell apart. These folks need to know, in my view. Additionally, maybe consider this as commercial and not cannabis. I think that the odor control in your staff meetings is very important to make sure that anybody west of Neuralia in the area nearest the high school has very severe odor control requirements, because we don't want the school children and the school district to be smelling weed. It concerns me, because I'm a proponent of the industry here, but I'm not a proponent of creating problems for the students or the parents. So odor control along Neuralia, and notice a few more folks to see if encroaching those residences is really what you want to do. I'm neutral on the idea of squaring off, except for my client that I represent would like that squared off. I'm 100% in support of eliminating the setbacks in these areas where there are no residences. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Karen Macedonia. Chair Creighton, I think you brought up a really, really important point. The workshop between the Planning Commission and the City Council was an amazing thing to see. But the City Council gave very specific direction that they wanted you to focus on certain areas. So with that is one thing, focus on certain areas. The second thing is we've spent a lot of time talking with no action item on the agenda. I would like to see the chair direct the staff that if it goes on the agenda, it comes on as an action item, so that you, as the commission, are then taking a step to move forward, because we're going over the same ground over and over and over again. Squaring off, I think you got some mistakes that you've made in the past, or that have gotten passed in the past. Potentially spot zoning, I don't know if we could call it that, but we do need to look at squaring off. But if we're focusing on the areas that we want to saturate for the industry, we're squaring off the zones. and we're having action items on the agenda rather than just discussion points, when it gets that far, you will be able to do something and move forward. And then we can look at how all of these pieces come together and you're making a decision that benefits everybody going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, I see nobody else from the public coming up. What's your pleasure?
I'm processing right now.
We ain't got that kind of time.
I'm sorry.
How long is that gonna take?
Okay, on how many of we had 3 potential city-initiated rezonings, right? Remember it?
These would, if you count these two, that makes a total of 3. One was already passed.
Yeah, one we just did. So these are 2 more. What's the cost? And we were fortunate enough to have somebody take care of the last one, but I don't think that's gonna happen again.
$15,000
Is that for 2 or 1?
each.
We get the property owner to
I doubt it.
apply.
No,
We didn't get the property, well, we got the developer to do it last time.
Well, we get the developer.
Right, so as, you could, you can't condition.
Yeah,
zone.
we do get some of it back with the site plan reviews and all that other stuff,
I guess
so.
could we put a fee on it, that, when these do develop, that it comes back?
You'd have to ask law, legal. What's your pleasure, gentlemen? Which way you wanna go? If we're gonna work this at all, I mean, one way or the other, it's gotta come to a public hearing.
Yeah.
So if we're gonna work them both at the same time, one or the other, how do you wanna proceed? Cause we can't just let it go. I mean, we can't just drop it. Well, we could, but, if that's your pleasure, then that's your pleasure.
Yeah, these are just suggestions, I mean, we could, just do those, or, just do that part. This is just
Tighten it
discussion.
up, tighten it up maybe?
Yeah, I'm the one to the left. Tighten that up. More likely to go with the one versus the other one.
Okay, so who would be in favor of working the issue on the left as a public hearing first? You don't vote.
That would, for me, that would be
Okay, that's
moving
one,
that one
that's one
forward
yes.
to
Do I
the
have any
public
more?
hearing.
Okay, yes.
Okay, all right. Do a public hearing on the item on the left.
All of it, or just the bottom portion? Because as Sean points out, there's nothing going up to that northeast.
Or you might, if you're gonna square it off, then square it off.
Yeah.
All right.
You know, it's gonna cost us the same amount of money no matter what, most likely. That's if the council approves it.
I think
We can do a public hearing, but they can shoot it down.
And
Well, that's interesting because that's just above where you want to do the tiny home.
28
overlay.
Yep.
That is right above.
Okay.
and scoring up as long, like you said, you got a small plan on that, basically on the other side, that's,
And you'd want to keep the 200-foot buffer.
that area would give you people
Yep.
with buffer.
Yep.
As that bad area, so
Yeah.
it's dead to everybody, not just one person.
The buffer on the south.
There's your direction.
Yeah.
Okay, we are done with discussion. Commissioner items and comments. This portion of the meeting is reserved for planning commissioners to present information, announcements, and items that have come to their attention. Short staff responses may be appropriate. The planning commission will take no formal action. A planning commissioner may request a calendar item for consideration at a future meeting or refer an item to staff. Commissioner Hogan,
Nothing at this time.
Commissioner Macedonio,
No, I don't have anything.
Commissioner Trumbull,
I haven't anything.
All right, I got one little thing here. Next council meeting, Christy Munt will be sworn in as our new commissioner. At that point, the planning commission meeting after that, we need to hold chair and vice chair nominations and elections. And so, give it some thought, gentlemen. Other than that, I have nothing.
So when is our next scheduled meeting?
17.
17th of December?
I know Chairman Creighton won't be here.
Yes, I will.
Oh, you will be.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be here for swearing in at the council meeting.
Okay.
But congratulations, Christy, in advance.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
All right, now motion to adjourn.
Staff has one,
Motion to adjourn.
staff has one thing.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just FYI, on consent, the council passed a resolution to approve our city manager to accept the SB2 grant money. I've written a draft application for the grant. It's for $160,000 and it has to go towards planning to increase housing production in the city. So I put in for creating a mixed use element in the zoning code, as well as creating a ADU element for the zoning code to bring it up to the state requirements. And also tiny home overlay, they would help. This would pay for that. So hopefully we get it. It's non-competitive, so as long as it qualifies, we should be able to get it.
Sean. Okay, do I have a
And
motion
I
to?
just said one quick thing too, I'm sorry.
You're killing me.
This is like when they don't give us the minutes.
Oh, by the way,
We were successful, you're gonna like this, we were successful in getting money in the planning commission budget for this year. And that means you can go to the Planning Commissioners Academy. It's in Sacramento, March 6th, 4th through 6th.
all five of us?
Yeah, you might have, maybe we can't give you 100% if all five wanna go.
But definitely make sure Christy goes.
Right. And Marie's on top of it. Unlike last year, we wanna make sure that you can be at the conference hotel, right in the middle of things.
If it's at the Queen Mary, don't count me in.
It's in Sacramento.
Oh, that's right, that's Long Beach, I'm sorry,
I
yeah.
was gonna say, Queen Mary just.
Yeah, I walked that ship, it is falling apart badly.
They might try and sail
I saw
up
it.
Sacramento.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye. Out.
Really did.
Thank you.
Well, the map spoke for itself. I wanted to find out.
I will find out real quick, yeah, exactly. My email will be blowing up.
Just give me that thing.
The benefits, if you will. Especially the 200 foot issue.
Oh, right.
I know you got a strong presentation.
I didn't put together the slideshow, so I think just trying to make sure.
Well, if we can get tiny houses of any kind here, I'm for it. I've been fighting for it for a long time. Just, I think it makes so much more sense for the future and our environment and everything else.